For the first time in my life, I finally understood. When you're poor, even your humiliation has to be served up on a festive day. That day was my engagement party. The grandest yard in Lion Village belonged to the village chief, and the liveliest feasts were always for other people's happy occasions. But my family's engagement party was nothing but a few rickety old tables squeezed into our yard. We borrowed a giant pot from the village canteen, stood 2 big bowls of pork and glass noodles, and fried up 2 plates of peanuts. On our gate, lopsided red paper banners were pasted. The wind blew, making the peeling edges look like a complete joke. I wore a red jacket my mother had borrowed for me. The sleeves were a bit too short, exposing a pair of thin, sickly pale wrists. The guests gossiped over melon seeds while sizing me up, like they were inspecting livestock waiting to be sold. Trunhei, you finally made it out of the gutter. The Zhou family has powerful relatives in town. You're getting a great deal by marrying him. After all, for a girl, nothing beats marrying into a good family. I heard the bride price is 1,800 yuan. The Liang family is making a fortune this time. I kept my eyes lowered, not saying a word. My mother, Wang Gixian, couldn't stop grinning from ear to ear. Oh, not at all, not at all, she kept repeating. It's just that Dakshan thinks highly of our Chunhain, she said politely. But her hands never let go of the iron box holding the money, clutching it like her very life depended on it. My father, Liao Mankang, squatted by the door, smoking tobacco, one puff after another, without uttering a single word. My brother, Lai Jinfu, ran around the yard raising his glass, bragging to anyone who'd listen. My sister is marrying well. To show family and I are one family now. We'll have to look out for each other from now on. When he said those words, his back was straighter than it had ever been. It was as if I wasn't the one getting engaged today, but him. Looking at everyone in the yard, my heart felt bitterly cold. I knew exactly what this marriage was. It wasn't that Zhou Daxiang actually liked me. The Shou family just wanted a daughter-in-law who could work like a mule, and whose bride price they could drag down as low as possible. And my family wanted to sell me off for cash, just so they could marry my brother off to someone better. Everyone knew exactly what was going on. They just didn't say it out loud. But I never expected that the first one to tear off the mask would be Zhou Daxiang. After 3 rounds of drinks, his face was flushed bright red from the alcohol. He suddenly slammed his glass down on the table. It made a loud, echoing bang. There's something I need to clear up today, right here in front of all our neighbors. The courtyard filled dead silent. Even the kids fighting over meat at the next table stopped mid-bite.
就乍看抽低啲 color
and glanced over at me. His eyes were full of contempt and a smug, self-satisfied look. I think I need to reconsider this marriage. The smile froze instantly on my mother's face. What do you mean by that, Daxiang? Didn't we already agree on everything? Judo-san scoffed. Just because we agreed doesn't mean things can't change, his mother, Liu Sufen, cut in. With a sarcastic smirk, she said, Sure, Chunhei is a hard worker, but everyone here knows what her family is like. Her father is a quiet, useless lump, and her mother can't even afford a decent dowry. Meanwhile, her brother is still begging for a wife. We are bringing a woman in to build a life, not to run a charity. Gasps of shock instantly rippled through the courtyard. My brother was the first to lose his temper. Auntie, what the hell is that supposed to mean? We already agreed on the bride price. Bride price? Lu Shifan slammed her chopsticks down. Our Daxiang isn't who he used to be. The niece of Station Master Lan in town has her eyes on him. She doesn't want a single penny of bride price, and her dowry even comes with a sewing machine and a bicycle. So tell me, why on earth would we choose to marry your sister? My mother's face turned pale in an instant. She turned to look at me. There was no sympathy in her eyes, only sheer panic, as if I were a piece of damaged goods, about to be rejected, right at the moment of delivery. Suddenly, he looked at me with pure disgust.
Hey, say something.
He lowered his voice and hissed through his teeth. Just play nice and placate to Shang. We can't panic right now. I stared at him, feeling my throat tighten. Placate to him? With what? By then, Zhou Daxiang already stood up, fueled by the alcohol. His words grew nastier and nastier. Look, Shang, don't blame me. A girl with your background might pass as decent in our village, but once you step out of Liang Village, you're absolutely nothing. Just because you had 2 years of schooling, you think you're hot stuff? At the end of the day, a woman still has to get married anyway. He smirked, looking down on me as if throwing me a bone. If you know what's good for you, we can still work things out. But if you're going to be difficult, then forget it. The courtyard fell dead silent, so quiet that I could hear a single piece of firewood crackling in the kitchen. I finally looked up, staring right at him. Are you done? Zhu Daxiang froze for a moment. He probably never expected this kind of reaction from me. I stood up and slowly slipped off the brighter red jacket I was wearing. I folded it neatly and placed it on the stool. Since you've made yourself perfectly clear, then let me make things clear too. My voice wasn't loud, yet it instantly silenced everyone in the courtyard. The engagement is off. My mother instantly lunged forward and grabbed me. Are you out of your mind, Lang Chunhei? Have you lost your mind? Everyone is watching. I violently shook off her hand. Exactly. Everyone is watching. I glared at Zhou Dexiang and said, spacing out every single word. Today you look down on my family for being poor. You look down on me, calling me a useless burden. You claim I'm not good enough for you. Well, you'd better mark my words. Today, it's not you rejecting me.
Get this straight. Li Yingcheng and the one dumping you.
Everyone in the courtyard froze in shock. Zhou Dexiang's face instantly turned bright red, like he'd just been slapped across the face in public. He probably never expected that a girl who barely even dared to speak up at home would have the guts to humiliate him like this in front of everyone. Who do you think you are, putting on this tough act? He pointed his finger at me and roared. If you don't marry me, who else would even want you?
亚冲了，允许死我们那一句，无能死败了新古代要塞资格里。
I smiled. That was the first time I smiled all day, and it was the coldest smile I'd ever given. Then you don't need to worry about me. I turned on my heel and walked back into the house. Behind me, chaos erupted. My mother was wailing. My brother was cursing. And my father finally got up. But after taking just 2 steps, he froze, standing by the threshold like a piece of dead wood, too cowardly to stop me, yet too useless to help. The room was dimly lit. I reached into the corner of the brick bed and pulled out an old cloth bundle. Inside was the money I had scraped together, penny by penny, over the years. Stitching shoe soles for others, harvesting corn in the fields, copying down blackboard text for the village primary school teacher, and even helping out with the grain threshing during the autumn harvest. It came to a total of 87 yuan. I wrapped the money tightly around my waist and stuffed a couple of changes of clothes into a plastic woven sack. Just as I was about to leave, I noticed my old elementary school certificate of merit stuck to the wall. It said, active learner and excellent academic performance. The paper was already yellowed and fragile. I stared at the certificate for 2 seconds, then reached out, tore it down, folded it up, and tucked it into my bag. The crowd in the courtyard still hadn't dispersed. When I walked out, carrying my woven sack, everyone stared at me. My mother lunged forward, trying to grab my bag, crying, "Where do you think you're going? Where can a young girl like you possibly go? To a place where I can actually live like a human being." With that, I took my first step forward and walked away. As I reached the courtyard gate, Delakyung's furious voice screamed from behind me. "Fine, get lost. If you're so tough, don't you dare come back. Mark my words, you'll be begging me in tears sooner or later." I didn't look back. The dirt road in the village was full of potholes. My shoes made a squelching sound every time I pulled them out of the thick mud. Darkness was falling. Cooking smoke rose from the chimneys of every house. Dogs barked at the end of the alleys, and someone's child was crying. I knew all of this so well. It felt like a suffocating net, but today, I had finally broken free from it. The town bus station was 4 miles away from the village. I walked the entire way. The soles of my feet were blistered and burning, and the night wind cut across my face like a knife. But I had only one thought in my mind. I had to leave. I had to get out of this place. Go somewhere where nobody knew me. Even if I had to sleep under a bridge. Even if I had to starve. It was still better than staying here and letting them control my fate. By the time the bus reached the county seat, it was already late at night. I stood outside the train station for the longest time, before finally gathering the courage to walk up to the ticket window and ask how to get to Guangdong. Without even looking up, the clerk mumbled, "Brangzhou?"
身兼东宫
I froze. It turned out the South wasn't just one place. It was many different places. I clenched my fists, remembering what I'd heard people say at the banquet earlier that day. Shenzhen is full of factories. As long as you go there, you'll find work. I raised my head. Shenzhen. As those 2 words slipped from my lips, they felt as light as a breeze, yet as heavy as fate itself. When the green train finally started chugging along, I sat right on the edge of the hard seat row, clutching my plastic woven bag tightly to my chest. Outside the window, it was pitch black. The carriage was packed with people. Some were going to seek shelter with relatives. Some were going to look for work. And some were holding their babies. And then there were people like me. One look and you could tell we had absolutely nothing to lose. The woman in the bunk opposite me saw how young I was. She asked, "Are you on your own?" I nodded. She asked again, "What are you heading to Shenzhen for?" I stayed quiet for a long moment before replying, "To change my destiny." She paused, caught off guard, and then smiled. "Well, aren't we ambitious?" I pressed my face against the cold glass of the window and smiled back. Yeah, it did sound pretty bold. But if I didn't think like that, I was afraid I wouldn't even survive the trip down south. The train rumbled and swayed along the tracks. Suddenly, Zhou Dexiang's words flashed through my mind. He told me that once I left the village, I wouldn't even survive. Well, I'm going to survive, no matter what. And not just survive, I'm going to live a better life than him. Better than anyone who ever looked down on me. My reflection stared back at me from the window. Thin and dark-skinned, but my eyes were burning with a fierce intensity. In that moment, I had no idea that years later, I would stand in a place 10,000 times brighter than this train station, with countless people looking up to me. All I knew then was that starting tonight, my destiny, Lang Chani's destiny, would never be controlled by Lang Village again. When the train pulled into Shenzhen, It was noon.
Back north, March was still freezing enough to make you hunch your shoulders.
But the wind here was thick with humidity, hitting my face like a warm, damp towel. I followed the crowd off the train and stood on the platform, completely dazed by the sight of it all. There were so many people. People in crisp dress shirts, others in bell-bottoms, some clutching woven plastic sacks, people pushing flatbed carts, some speaking Mandarin, others speaking dialects I couldn't understand, all rushing back and forth. The station was like a pot of boiling water. Outside the station, row after row of recruitment signs hung close together. Electronics factory urgently hiring female workers. Boarding included. Piece rate pay. Experienced workers preferred. My heart started pounding. It turned out there really were jobs here. It wasn't just some lie the folks back in the village made up. I didn't dare wander off. I just followed a few other girls carrying their bundles to a hiring booth. The clerk doing the registration didn't even bother to look up. What can you do? I can work. He looked like he had just heard a joke. He finally looked up and sized me up. Then head to the electronics factory. They're always short on female workers. And just like that, I entered an electronics factory in Bonn that made radio parts. I only remember the name of the place later. Shuncheng Electronics. The first time I stepped onto the workshop floor, I caught a whiff of a strange odor. It was a mix of machine oil, plastic, and the stale sweat of people trapped inside all day. The ceiling fans buzzed loudly overhead, and rows of assembly lines stretched out, stacked with workers wearing blue uniforms. Everyone had a small basket of parts sitting right in front of them. Their hands moved as fast as machines. The supervisor was a woman in her early 30s. Her name was Miss Luo, and she had a face as cold and long as iron. "New girl, sit here." She shoved me down into an empty seat. She tossed a box of screws and a plastic casing in front of me. "Watch closely. Washer first, then the screw. Tighten it and pass it down. If you're slow, I'll dock your pay. Make a mistake, and you'll redo it on your own time." Before I could even nod, she had already walked off. Next to me, a tall, thin girl with a hair tie clamped between her teeth was working at lightning speed. Without pausing her hands, she spared me a quick glance. "Don't daze off? They really will dock your pay." I hurriedly tried to copy her. But before I could even get the first screw in, the person down the line was already rushing me. "Hurry up, we're waiting." My hands shook, and the screw slipped and fell to the floor. A wave of muffled laughter erupted around me. My face burned with embarrassment as I bent down to pick it up. Just as I lifted my head, Supervisor Lowe's voice came crashing down on me. "Are you here to work, or are you here to play? Can't even hold a screw steady. What the hell are you even good for?" I grit my teeth and didn't say a word. The insults back in my village were way worse. I've heard it all, but here, it's different. Nobody here gives you a break just because they feel sorry for you. And nobody's going to go easy on you just because you're a girl. If you're slow, you're just getting in the way. If you're clumsy, you're just a useless piece of trash. By the afternoon, I could barely feel my hands anymore. My fingers were raw and red from the metal nuts, and the webbing of my thumbs was shaking from the ache. My eyes were going blurry from staring at the tiny parts. But I didn't dare slow down, because I knew how the piece rate system worked. The more you make, the more you earn. And if you're too slow, you deserve to starve. By the time we clocked out, it was almost 8 at night. I followed the crowd to the cafeteria to grab some food. My meal box had a scoop of some yellowish, disgusting greenish yellow muck, along with a piece of dry, rock-hard lunch meat. The rice was steamed into a giant, sticky clump. The moment I took my first bite, I almost gagged and threw up. The tall, thumb girl next to me saw my face and smirked. "First time, huh?" I nodded. She said, "Don't worry, you'll get used to it in a couple of days. If you don't, you'll just starve to death." She held her lunchbox, squatted down against the wall, and wolfed it down in just a few bites. "I'm Lingshat Men, from Hunan. What about you?"
Yelcho. I'm from up north, in Hebei.
"I can tell." She glanced at me. "You northern girls are all the same when you first get here. You still got that stubborn, I don't accept this look on your face. Give it a month, and you'll fall right in line." I didn't say anything to that. I just kept my head down and aggressively stuffed my face. What was the point of being stubborn? When you can barely even feed yourself, pride is the first thing to go. The dorm was right behind the factory. 8 people crammed into one room with bunk beds. The wooden bedboards were so thin, they creaked loudly every time you tossed or turned. Damp towels hung by the door. Inside, the room smelled like a mix of cheap soap, sweaty feet, and cheap pomade. I was assigned to the top bunk. As I hoisted my plastic sack up there, a round-faced girl below looked up at me. "Hey, newbie, keep an eye on your things," she said. "We don't do hand-holding here, and nobody's going to protect you." Another girl, who was combing her hair, chimed in. "And keep your money close to your body. Don't leave your meal tickets lying around either. If you lose them, nobody's replacing them." I touched the cash wrapped around my waist, feeling a tiny bit of relief. While washing up, I stood by the communal sink, looking at my reflection in the mirror. My hair was a messy nest. My nose was dripping with sweat, and the oversized uniform hung off me like a sack. I looked like a complete wreck. But as I stared at myself in the glass, I suddenly wanted to laugh. I survived. At least, I survived the first day. After the dorm lights went out that night, the room was still buzzing with noise. Some complained about getting chewed out by the foreman. Others said their families had sent letters demanding money, and some whispered about which male worker was the most handsome.
Lin Xiaomin tossed and turned on the bottom bunk.
Lowering her voice, she asked,
Chunhyo, why did you come here? To escape a marriage. I froze for a moment.
I can tell. I can totally tell.
She sighed.
Someone like you, with that fire still in your eyes?
Nobody would run this far alone, unless they were backed into a corner.
I didn't say anything. After a moment, she spoke up again.
Don't say I didn't warn you.
You won't get rich in this factory just by working hard.
The ones who actually make it big aren't the ones sitting on the assembly line. I stared down at the wooden bunk board in the pitch black, making no sound. But those words pricked my heart like a needle. The next day, I got up 30 minutes earlier than everyone else. While everyone else is still fighting over the faucet to wash their faces, I'm already squatting by the workshop doors, watching the shipments come in. Box after box of plastic casings, and bags of screws being wheeled back and forth on flatbed carts. I don't really know what I'm looking at, but I just want to see where all of this comes from. And where it's all going. Back when I was farming in the village, I knew one thing.
Crops don't just grow out of the dirt for free.
Fertilizer, seeds,
Weather, labor. You have to factor in absolutely everything, just to know if a single acre of land is making a profit.
It's the exact same for a factory. Every single screw on this assembly line doesn't just appear out of thin air. The morning shift bell rings. Just as I'm about to head into the workshop, I suddenly hear voices near the warehouse doors. Get these boxes of factory seconds out of here tonight. Don't leave them out in the open. How should we handle them?
Samodil.
They're all flawed anyway. They're just gathering dust anyway. I freeze in my tracks. Factory seconds. Flawed goods. At that exact moment, something clicked in my head, and everything lit up. While everyone else on the line is buried in work, turning screws, I suddenly realize the real money might not be in the screws I'm holding, but in the things everyone else doesn't want. By my 7th day at Trunching Electronics, I finally get a feel for how this place runs. The day and night shifts rotate endlessly, with the assembly line constantly pushing us to our limits. The foreman yells at us like it's second nature. But there is one thing that nobody seems to care about. The factory seconds. These so-called factory seconds are just flawed items filtered out before shipment. Maybe there's a tiny scratch on the plastic casing, or the label is pasted on slightly crooked, or a corner of the packaging is dented. There are no major issues, just a bunch of minor flaws. They can't be sold to regular clients. Throwing them away would be a waste. The warehouse clears them out every few days, and the prices are dirt cheap. The first time I heard the price, I thought my ears were playing tricks on me. A box of 60 small radio casings normally sells for 70 or 80 bucks straight from the factory. But the clearance stock? It's only a dozen or so bucks a box. My heart started itching with temptation. But I didn't have any money. The 87 bucks in my pocket had already dwindled to almost nothing after train tickets, food, and miscellaneous expenses. I had to survive. First, only then would I have the right to think about anything else. But once an idea like that gets into your head, it's like a seed taking root and sprouting. While I worked, I kept my eyes and ears open. 3 days later, my chance came. That day, while we were getting food in the cafeteria, Ling Shomel complained that the food looked like pig slop, swearing as she headed out to buy some flatbread. I followed her right out of the factory gates. We took a turn around the alley outside, and I noticed quite a few people setting up stalls to sell cheap trinkets, watches, hairpins, towels, cassette tapes, and even radios. A chubby boss was waving a gently used radio, shouting to the customers, "Sale! Sale! Dirt cheap! As long as it works, it's only 12 bucks. I stood there and watched him for a long time. I recognized the casing on that radio. It was made right in our Shunxing factory. The label was just a little crooked, and there was a white scuff mark on the corner, but he was still selling them just fine. My mind went, boom, like someone had given me a violent push from behind. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep. Early the next morning, I counted my remaining money 3 times. 28 bucks and 40 cents. It wasn't much, but it was enough to take a gamble. During the lunch break, I skipped the cafeteria and slunk around the back of the warehouse, waiting. Eventually, the auntie who usually handles clearance stock releases showed up. Her name was Auntie Huang, a local Cantonese woman in her late 40s, who always had a sharp, calculating look in her eyes. I gathered my courage and stepped forward. Auntie Huang, I was wondering if I could ask you something. She sized me up from head to toe. Go ahead, spit it out. Do you sell your clearance stock to the factory staff? She froze for a couple of seconds, then suddenly burst out laughing. Oh, aren't you a clever one? I felt my face grow hot with embarrassment, but I bit the bullet and said, I saw those things being thrown out and thought it was such a waste. She scoffed. Who told you they were being thrown out? There's always someone lining up to take them. My heart sank. As expected, The road to making money is always crowded with people who are quick on their feet. But the next second, Auntie Huang added, "But as it happens, there's a small batch of leftovers this time."
The regular buyers thought it was too much of a hassle to bother with.
"If you really want them, I suppose we can make a deal."
My heart skipped a beat, and my breathing quickened.
"How much?" I asked. "For the plastic cases and matching earphones. $26 for the whole lot." I nearly gasped out loud right then and there.
That was literally every single cent I had in the world.
Auntie Huang saw me hesitate.
She curled her lip and scoffed. "If you don't have the money, don't waste my time asking. Doing business isn't a game." She turned to walk away. She turned to walk away.
I gritted my teeth and chased after her.
"I'll take them," I cried out. She stopped and looked back, a flicker of surprise flashing in her eyes.
"You're just a young girl. Who are you even going to sell them to?"
"I'll find a way."
Honestly, I had absolutely no idea if I could pull it off.
But when you're poor and desperate to change your life,
You can't always wait for a foolproof plan.
you just have to have the guts to take that first leap of faith.
Auntie Huang led me over to inspect the goods.
There were 3 massive cardboard boxes.
The plastic cases had some minor scratches.
And some of the earphone cords had slightly crushed packaging. I squatted down, picking up a few to feel them.
The more I handled them, the more confident I became.
I can sell these. I know I can. I pulled out every single dollar I had on me, my hands trembling slightly.
Auntie Huang counted the bills and handed me back 40 cents change.
She gave me a long, meaningful look. "All right then, come by after your shift tonight and haul them out yourself." After work, Ling Xiaomen saw me squatting by the warehouse entrance, looking stressed. She walked up and asked, "What on earth are you doing?"
I didn't keep secrets from her, so I told her everything.
Her eyes went wide as saucers. "Lin Chuhei, have you completely lost your mind? You spent every single penny you had on a pile of actual trash."
"It's not trash. It's inventory." "Inventory, my ass. If you can't sell these, you're going to starve tomorrow."
I stood up and brushed the dust off my jeans. "Let's just sell them first and worry about the rest later."
Ling Xiaomen kept grumbling and complaining.
But she still ended up helping me carry the boxes anyway.
The two of us stumbled along, struggling to carry 3 massive boxes.
Even the security guard gave us a suspicious look as we walked out of the factory gate. I didn't waste any time, heading straight for the alley with the street stalls I'd spotted a few days ago. Night was falling,
And the alley was absolutely packed.
I found the fat boss who sold radios and got straight to the point.
"Boss, are you buying stock?" At first, he didn't even bother looking at me properly. "What kind of stock?" I popped the box open and showed him.
The fat boss picked up a radio casing and examined it.
Then tested the earphones. His eyes lit up instantly. "These are from Shunqing. Where on earth did you get them?"
Just tell me, you buying or not?
He stared at me for a few seconds, probably trying to see if I was an easy target. "All right, I'll take them. 35.
My heart skipped a beat. I could make a profit of 9 yuan instantly, but I kept my face completely blank.
Channeling the shrewd women from my village bargaining over eggs.
I frowned and shook my head. Way too low.
The fat boss chuckled. "You've got a lot of nerve, girl."
This is just factory clearance stock. I have to find a way to get rid of it myself.
I squatted down, picked up a dented earphone box, and pointed at it. Only the box is slightly squashed, but the product inside is perfectly fine.
"When you sell it, just tear off the outer plastic wrap."
Who's going to notice?
I picked up another radio casing and continued.
This tiny white scratch? Behind a glass display counter. Who's going to stare that closely? You could easily sell these for 12 apiece, and people would snap them up.
"You'll be doubling or tripling your money on my stock."
The smile slowly faded from the fat boss's face. He clearly hadn't expected a young girl in a factory uniform to see right through his trade secrets. "All right, so, how much do you want?"
48. "Are you robbing me?"
Then don't buy them.
I stood up and reached down to close the box.
Ling Xiaomen just stood there, completely dumbfounded.
She probably never expected me to be this bold. The fat boss gritted his teeth. 46. 42 at most. I stared him down and didn't budge.
In the end, he slapped his thigh.
Fine. 45.
"You're a sharper negotiator than me, girl."
Sold at 45. Bought at 26. A net profit of 19 yuan in just one night? That would take over 10 days of grueling work on the assembly line. The moment the cash was handed to me,
My hive's pounding like crazy.
and my palms were burning. It wasn't because 19 yuan was some fortune,
But because for the first time I realized with absolute certainty
That besides slaving away,
there was actually another way to make money.
on the way back to the dorm,
Lin Xiaomeng kept staring at me the whole time.
like she'd seen a ghost. Lang Cho-hei,
Is your brain wired differently from everyone else? I carefully tucked the money into the secret lining of my bra,
smiled and said,
no. Then how did you think of that? To be honest, I can't quite explain it myself. I just felt like, while everyone else was staring at the tiny bit of work right in front of them, there were always opportunities slipping right past their noses.
and those missed opportunities.
Are usually the ones that are worth the most. At night, as soon as the dorm lights went out, I lay in bed.
my ears still ringing with the daytime buzz of the factory floor.
But I didn't feel tired at all.
My mind was completely consumed by those combs. Buying at 26, selling at 45. What if it's not 3 boxes next time, but 5?
What if I didn't just sell to one stall owner,
But to many more.
What if I wasn't just flipping leftover stock, but knew exactly where it came from and where it was heading next?
In the dark, I touched those 19 yuan over and over, 3 times.
Just a few thin sheets of paper? But they felt far more real than a whole year of backbreaking labor back in the village.
The next morning, when I headed to the workshop,
Auntie Wang happened to be sipping tea by the warehouse entrance.
She glanced at me and asked nonchalantly, "Did you sell them?" I nodded, and only then did his eyes truly settle on my face.
It was as if he was seeing me for the very first time.
He chuckled.
You've got a sharp eye, girl.
I smiled too, but before the smile could even reach my lips, I spotted someone standing at the far end of the workshop. It was Hu Guangfei, the owner of Shenchang.
he was wearing a white shirt, his potbelly sticking out.
Chatting with for me, Luo.
As they talked,
He glanced over in my direction.
His gaze wasn't heavy, but it still made my heart tighten for some reason. Suddenly, I had this bad feeling that my little stunt might have already been caught.
When Hu Guangfei summoned me to his office,
the entire workshop fell silent for a second.
Formaloa slammed his clipboard onto the counter.
A complex look in his eyes.
As I stood up,
dozens of eyes followed me.
Some looked on with envy.
Some with curiosity.
And others were just waiting to watch me fall on my face. In a factory like this, getting called out by the boss isn't always a good thing. It could easily mean you're about to get the axe.
Hu Guangfei's office was on the 2nd floor.
2 potted money trees stood right outside his door.
When I walked in, he was sitting behind his desk, sipping tea. Tea leaves drifted in his white porcelain cup,
And a stack of invoices was spread across his desk.
He looked up at me and offered a smile.
He looked friendly enough, but there was no warmth in his eyes. "Have a seat," he said. I didn't.
He didn't seem to mind. "Selly," he said, "I hear you've been quite the businesswoman lately."
My heart skipped a beat, but I pretended like nothing was wrong.
Nothing much. I just bought some junk other people didn't want.
Junk other people didn't want,
He chuckled. Flipping that junk makes you money a hell of a lot faster than the assembly line, doesn't it? I kept my mouth shut.
Right now, saying even a single word would be handing him leverage.
Hu Guangfang faffed down the teacup.
And interlaced his fingers.
He sized me up like I was a piece of merchandise. I don't have a problem with my workers being sharp. Being sharp is a good thing.
It shows you actually have a brain.
He paused there.
And suddenly changed his tone. But wasting your days on the assembly line? That really is a waste of your talents.
I braced myself, every nerve in my body tightening.
There was no way he was praising me out of the goodness of his heart.
Sure enough, his very next words were,
Starting today, you're off the assembly line.
"Go to the warehouse and help Sister Huang with shipping and inventory. And while you're at it, handle some of the order tracking."
Even the accountant standing by the door froze in surprise.
I was stunned too.
Warehouse and order tracking.
Those jobs were a massive step up from the assembly line.
You're completely shielded from the elements.
But most importantly, you get to handle the actual orders.
You see the shipments.
You get a front row seat to how the real money is made. I never expected Hu Guangfei to give me a promotion like this. But my first instinct wasn't joy. It was pure suspicion. A boss doesn't hand you a promotion out of sheer appreciation for your intelligence. If he's promoting you, it's only because you can be useful to him.
Seeing me silent,
Hu Guangfei raised an eyebrow. "What? You're not interested?" "I am," I said, quickly lowering my head.
"Thank you, Boss Hu.
His grin widened.
Work hard, stick with me, and you'll do a hell of a lot better than tightening screws on an assembly line."
As soon as I stepped out of the office, I saw Lin Xiaomen hovering anxiously near the workshop door. The moment she saw me, she rushed over, grabbing my arm.
"How did it go?"
"Did he chew you out?"
Oh, please. Then why do you look like you just crawled out of a grave?
I glanced at her.
And slowly said, "I've been transferred to the warehouse."
Ling Xiaomen's jaw dropped.
And she couldn't close it for a long time.
What? Her face was even more shocked than if I'd just made $19.
By lunchtime, the entire cafeteria knew about it.
Some said I got lucky. Others said I just knew whose boots to lick.
And some sourly whispered, "She's only been here a few days and already got into the warehouse."
Who knows what dirty tricks she used? I heard every word, but I acted like I didn't. The truth is, when a poor person takes one step up, the first people to show up aren't the ones happy for you.
They're the ones waiting to watch you fall. The work in the warehouse was way more chaotic than I expected.
Tracking inventory coming in and going out, counting quantities,
Matching model numbers, and even tracking when customers are picking up.
which batch is urgent, which one can wait.
I had to keep all of it straight in my head.
Auntie Huang kept calling me stupid, but she didn't hold back a single secret.
This model is for box appliances. Do not mix it up.
Don't rush to ship this order yet.
The boss said we need to wait a bit.
Don't put that batch of raw materials in the main ledger yet. We'll process it all together at the end of the month. I listened intently, taking notes of everything. At first, I was absolutely exhausted.
The assembly line wears out your hands.
But the warehouse drains your brain.
But the more I did it, the more I felt like I was stepping into a much bigger world.
I realized a truckload of screws coming in isn't just a simple delivery. You have to see who's cheaper,
Who offers longer payment terms.
and whose quality is actually stable.
and when the products are made, they don't just ship them out right away. You have to see which customer is desperate,
Which one is easygoing? And which one can be put on hold?
but most importantly,
I finally saw how money is actually made and kept.
For the exact same batch of goods.
Shipping today versus shipping tomorrow.
even a difference of just a few cents. Don't underestimate those few cents.
When the volume is huge, it adds up to hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of dollars.
And who Guangfa? He is a master at exploiting exactly that.
He is nothing like those mindless workhorses in the workshop who do nothing but sweat.
He walks around with a fake smile on his face every single day.
But in reality, he is a snake. When he squeezes his clients, all it takes is one simple excuse. Hang on, things are a bit tight at the factory right now. And he jacks the price right up.
He isn't making money through hard work. He is exploiting time delays,
Inflation gaps, and the vulnerabilities of human nature.
When I finally figured all this out,
It was like a whole new door had suddenly opened up in my mind.
I realized getting rich was never about how fast your hands can move.
or how honest your promises are. That night, back in the dorm,
Ling Suman leaned over and asked me if the warehouse job was good.
if it's so great, then why do you look so miserable? I leaned back against the bed rail and let out a soft sigh.
Because I know he didn't put me there. Because he respects me.
Then what is it? He wants to control me. He wants to keep me on a tight leash.
Ling's eye well froze.
I looked down, rubbing the fresh calluses on my palm,
I've been reselling leftover stock, I whispered.
and he caught me. Instead of letting me figure out the trade on my own outside,
He decided to drag me right under his nose. He wants to use me, but he also despises me. Ling Shouman stared at me for a long time before muttering, "You people with actual brains."
Your lives must be so exhausting.
I smiled. I have to be this way. If I were any more naive, I probably would have resigned myself to my fate back at the engagement party.
a few days later,
I assisted An Huang with filling an order for the first time. The client was a small radio assembly factory in Shenzhen. They were desperately short of standard screws and plastic casings.
They kept pushing us hard for them.
Brungfa claimed he was on it.
But his actions showed no urgency whatsoever. I watched him stash their shipment deep in a corner of the warehouse and deliberately ship out everyone else's orders first. By the afternoon, the client's purchasing agent was calling every 5 minutes in a panic. Only then did he casually answer and tell them the price of raw materials had gone up. We can still ship it today, but they're asking for 30 cents more per set. Auntie Huang, standing next to me, whispered, "Here we go again." Something clicked inside me.
30 cents a set. 30 cents. In large quantities, that adds up to a massive fortune.
But I was more focused on something else. That assembly plant was genuinely desperate for stock. They weren't faking it. There had to be a much bigger deal riding on this.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be in such a frantic rush. I memorized the name of the plant.
And I noted the frantic tone of the buyer. Later that evening, just before closing time,
胡光马闻到贺电呢。
The office phone rang. Again. And Huang was gone, leaving me all alone in the warehouse.
I stared at that black telephone.
My heart started racing.
It rang 3 times.
4 times. On the 5th ring, I picked it up.
Sure enough, it was that same buyer.
His voice was completely hoarse with desperation.
Hello? Is this Shanxing? Is Boss Ku there?
We absolutely have to assemble the machines. Tomorrow morning.
I've sought motherly.
If you don't ship them now, we're completely ruined. I held the receiver, staying silent for 2 seconds.
Then I whispered, Boss Hu isn't here.
Then when on earth can you guys ship the goods? I look over at the batch of goods already packed and sitting in the corner of the warehouse. Slowly, I spoke. The goods are actually ready. The other end fell instantly silent. What do you mean by that?
I lowered my voice even more.
It means if you keep waiting, it might cost you a lot more than just 30 cents extra. The guy on the other end was clearly a smart man. With just that one sentence, he understood everything.
His breathing grew heavy. Gritting his teeth, he said, "Tell Boss Hu to call me the second he gets back.
I'll pay the extra price tonight." I hung up. My heart was hammering violently against my chest. At that moment, I knew I had crossed the line. But I didn't regret it for a second.
Because I could already smell the money.
And what made my heart race even faster was a sudden realization. I wasn't just learning how the game is played. I was already starting to get a feel for how the game is played. That night,
Provenfa came back very late.
reeking of alcohol. The second he stepped into the office, the ringing phone made him frown in irritation. When he picked up the call, I was right outside the door checking the orders.
The door wasn't fully closed,
so I could hear everything clear as day.
"Why the rush, Boss Zhang?"
Business is all about negotiation. Fine. Since you put it that way, I won't beat around the bush. I'll ship it out to you tonight. The price hike? That wasn't my idea. It's because material costs went up. He put on a great act.
But his eyes were already dancing with greed.
After hanging up, he sat back in his chair and lit a cigarette. He was clearly in an incredibly good mood.
安检画我能的限定配布画。
And for once, he actually spared a few words. See that? Doing business isn't just about making the products. It's about knowing how to handle people.
Auntie Huang nodded repeatedly.
I stood outside the door, my palms sweating slightly. He had no idea that tonight's deal only went through because I did half the work behind the scenes.
Of course, I wasn't stupid enough to claim the credit.
Someone like me isn't even worthy of stepping into the spotlight yet. But starting from that very night, I completely understood one thing. Business isn't a dead formula. Products are dead, but people are alive. The ones who make the real big money are never the most honest people. They're the ones who know exactly how to spin a story. The next morning, Kukwao was in a great mood. He even threw a glance my way when he walked past the warehouse.
You've been doing all right lately.
Coming from him, that was already a huge compliment.
I kept my head down and quietly agreed.
Once he left, Auntie Huang glanced at me.
And said with a knowing look,
You took that call last night, didn't you?
my heart instantly tightened. But he didn't call me out. He just smiled.
You've got a lot of nerve.
I didn't say a word. Auntie Huang slammed the invoice in her hand onto the desk. She lowered her voice.
But don't get too smug just yet.
Just because a guy like Hu Bongfa let you get away with it once doesn't mean he'll let you do it a second time. I nodded. I believed those words more than anyone. Over the next few days, I kept an even lower profile. During the day, I shipped orders like normal and carried boxes just like everyone else. But when I got back to the dorm at night, I started taking notes on scrap paper in secret. Which supplier delivered today? Who was rushing their orders? Which type of screw was used the most? Which clients were the easiest to deal with? And which purchasing managers called the most frequently? I wrote down every single detail. Ling Xiaoman leaned over my bed to take a look. She shook her head.
Are you just a worker? Or are you planning to take over this entire factory?
I smiled. You have to learn how it works first, before you even qualify to think about taking it over.
She rolled her eyes,
Grabbed her towel, and headed off to take a shower. Mark my words, sooner or later, you're either going to marry the boss, or become the boss yourself.
I didn't answer. To me, being the boss's wife was nothing. If I was going to be anything, I was going to be the boss.
A few days later,
Shenzhen factory landed a massive order. They were supplying custom casings and standard screws for a client that assembled tape recorders. The workshop was in complete chaos.
Yet, Hu Bongfa wasn't in any rush to push production.
Instead, he deliberately held back a key batch of specifications. I didn't understand his game at first.
But then, I overheard him talking to the accountant outside his office, and it all clicked.
Don't finish the whole batch yet. Hold some back.
Why hold them back?
You probably don't get it.
Hu Bongfa blew out a puff of smoke.
They've got a final assembly line waiting. If we delay them for just one day, they'll realize exactly who holds their lifeline. My heart skipped a beat. So even a tightwad like Lu Yishu could bleed money. That afternoon, the procurement officer from that client company came in person. A man in his 30s, his shirt completely drenched in sweat. He was wearing a desperate, pleading smile the second he walked in.
Boss Zhu, please, have a heart.
Just send us one truckload first. Our big boss is breathing down our necks. If the machines aren't installed tomorrow, some heads are seriously going to roll.
Hu Bongfa held his teacup, acting as if he hadn't heard a word.
It's not that I won't ship them. It's just that the market is too busy, and we can't fit you into the schedule. The procurement officer's face went completely pale. We can negotiate the price. The moment those words left his mouth, I knew he had lost. Whoever panics first is the one who has to pay extra.
Sure enough, Hu Bongfa slowly put down his teacup.
Well, then it all depends on your sincerity, Boss Zhang. He ended up squeezing a massive extra sum out of that single order. That night, when settling the books, Hu Bongfa roared with laughter in his office. The exact same batch of screws, shipping them yesterday versus shipping them today, that difference is pure profit. I stood by the door, listening in absolute silence. So silent that a spark of clarity slowly lit up in my heart. Yes, the exact same batch of goods. Shipping them yesterday versus shipping them today. The difference wasn't just profit, it was vision. It was positioning. The people on the assembly line only see screws. But the person in the boss's seat sees people begging to hand over their cash while being choked. That night, after I got back to the dorm, I wrote down a lot of things again. Ling Xiaoman came back after washing her hair. With her hair still dripping wet, she leaned over the edge of my bed. What are you writing down now? Secrets to making money. Have you figured it out? Just a little. Well, when you strike it rich in the future, don't forget to take me with you. I looked up at her and suddenly smiled. If that day ever comes, I won't just take you with me. I'm going to make everyone who ever looked down on me watch helplessly as I claw my way to the top.
Ling Xiaoman was taken aback, then straightened her posture.
Maybe because I'm usually too quiet. He'd rarely heard me speak with such a sharp edge.
It took forever to squeeze out. Lying Shanhei. People like you are actually terrifying.
I looked down, folded the scrap paper covered in numbers, and stuffed it under my pillow.
Being scary is exactly the point. In this world, honest people only get treated like doormats.
But my slight progress quickly brought trouble.
On payday, around noon,
The accountant tossed the envelope onto the desk.
tore it open and took a look.
My brow furrowed instantly.
Something was wrong. The warehouse and merchandising subsidies were missing. They weren't factored in. I took the pay envelope and went to find the accountant.
The accountant flipped through her ledger without even looking up.
"There's no mistake," she said. "But I was transferred this month. A probationary transfer doesn't count as official." "Who said that?" Only then did the accountant finally look up.
She stared at me expressionlessly.
"The boss said so."
It clicked instantly.
Du Grongfa was putting me in my place. He knew I was smart, and he knew I'd been seeing too much lately.
So he wanted to make sure I understood.
No matter how capable you are,
How the money is paid in this factory.
and which way the doors open is still his call. I clutched the pay envelope, my knuckles turning white. Seeing me stand there frozen, the accountant added coolly, "Take it or leave it."
There are plenty of people lining up outside to take your place. Anyway, suddenly, I smiled.
In that very moment, my anger vanished.
Seriously. Because I realized this move of Hu Guangfa's wasn't just to keep me down.
He was giving me a wake-up call, a reminder that no matter how smart you are, if you're making money for someone else, you're just a tool. If you don't want to be kicked aside like trash, there's only one way out: to rise to the top.
That night, I sat by the convenience store behind the factory, taking a huge, angry bite of a 20-cent flatbread.
Lin Showman squatted beside me, cursing out the cheapskate boss on my behalf for ages.
I'll show him. I'm going to hustle like crazy.
He won't give you a single penny extra.
I just chewed my flatbread and kept quiet. Why aren't you even a little mad? I swallowed that dry, tasteless bite, looked up at the moths swarming around the streetlight, and said in a flat voice, "Oh, I am mad. But right now, what I really want to know is, besides helping Hu Guangfa make money,
Who else could I be making it for?"
right as the words left my mouth, a black Santana pulled up at the factory gate. It wasn't a brand new car,
But in a place like this, surrounded by nothing but bicycles and tricycles, it stuck out like a sore thumb.
The driver got out and opened the back door.
A man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a crisp, clean white shirt, with the sleeves rolled up to his wrists. His face was completely expressionless. Yet you could tell instantly he was nothing like the people here. As he walked toward the office,
Go Gongfam practically jogged out to meet him.
"Mr. Shen, what brings you here in person?"
I wasn't planning on looking.
But as the man walked past the warehouse entrance,
His eyes swept past me. Just a single casual glance. It was cold and calm, as if he could see right through me, without even caring.
I quickly looked down, pretending to keep eating my flatbread. But something stirred deep inside me.
I had no idea who he was, but my gut told me.
This man was in a completely different league than Hu Guangfa.
And my future shouldn't be trapped in this tiny factory in Shansheng.
Black Santana came and went, like a gust of wind.
First thing the next morning,
The factory went right back to its usual routine.
Form Lo was yelling at people as usual.
NT1 was sipping her tea, and Hu Gongfei still had that fake, scheming smile on his face.
But something in me had changed. A tiny spark had been lit. I started paying close attention to everyone who visited the factory. Who the clients were.
And who the suppliers were.
Who actually calls the shots.
And who are just the errand boys.
I even secretly asked Auntie Huang, "What does that boss Shen who came yesterday actually do?"
Auntie Huang gave me a look.
And said with a half smile, "Why are you asking about him?"
Oh, just curious.
Just curious, huh?
She snorted. "He's in trading, and he doesn't just source goods for Shanqing.
Word is, he's got massive connections. Way over in Hong Kong. He's on a completely different level than Hu Guangfa.
Trading? Hong Kong?"
Massive connections. I quietly carved those words into my memory.
Life inside this factory had already opened my eyes to so much, but the world outside was clearly so much bigger.
Just then, the old security guard yelled from outside, "Yang Chou, you've got a letter."
My heart instantly sank.
Since I arrived in Shenzhen,
I hadn't written home once.
it wasn't that. I didn't want to.
It was that I didn't dare. I was terrified that if I wrote,
They would sniff out my trail through the ink and hunt me down.
but I never expected they would track me down first.
When I held the letter in my hands, the envelope was crumpled and worn.
The handwriting was my mother's.
Crooked and shaky, clearly written with someone else guiding her hand.
Standing behind the warehouse, I tore the envelope open. There was only half a sheet of paper inside.
Trunhe, your brother is trying to get married. The girl's family is demanding a bride price, and we need to build 2 new tiled rooms for them. Since you have a job out there, you should be helping your family.
The whole village already laughed at us when you threw a tantrum and ran off last time.
If you have any conscience left, send 300 yuan back. Once your brother is settled, you'll have support in the future too.
Mom, not a single word asking if I was eating well. Not a single word asking if I was cold or if I was tired. And absolutely nothing about how much I was humiliated at that engagement banquet.
Between every single line, there was only one thing. Money. I crumpled the paper in my fist, crushing it until it was completely wrinkled.
Aunt Wang walked past me.
She saw how pale I looked and casually asked how things were back home.
I just nodded.
She caught sight of the words, bride price, on the paper, shook her head, and sighed with a wry smile. Let me guess. Asking for money for your brother again, right? I didn't say a word, but she acted like she'd seen this 1,000 times before.
You girls from the villages.
Most of you share the same miserable fate. Your family feeds you just enough to keep you alive growing up. And the second you start earning, you become the whole family's personal cash cow. She walked away after saying that, but those words pierced my heart like a needle.
A cash cow?
Yeah, she's right.
In their eyes, I'm not a daughter. I'm not a sister.
I'm just a walking, breathing cash cow. I was completely out of it for the rest of the day. When I got back to the dorm that night,
Ling Shao noticed it immediately. What's wrong with you?
You look like you've lost your soul.
I handed her the letter.
She scanned it, quickly, and immediately cursed.
Is your mother insane? You just got to Shenzhen. She's already demanding $300?
I gave a bitter laugh.
If I scrape together everything I have, I don't even have a few dozen yuan.
So, what are you going to do?
What else can I do? I folded the letter, stuffed it back into the envelope, and muttered, I have to start saving.
Are you really going to send it?
If my brother can't afford a wife. Since they wrote this first letter, they'll write a second, then a third. Once everyone in the village knows I'm earning money out here, they'll sink their teeth in and never let me go. Lynn Shellman slammed her hand against the bed frame in frustration. You're just too soft-hearted. I stayed silent for a long time before whispering. It's not that I'm soft-hearted. It's just that. I know how poor families work. They're experts at using family ties as a noose to choke you. She didn't say a word after that. I rolled over, facing the wall, but my mother's words kept echoing in my head. Once your brother is settled, you'll have someone to rely on. Who have I ever relied on? When I had a burning fever as a kid, I was the one who had to survive it all alone.
When I was a kid, the only way I could pay for my school books was by sweeping the village school's floors for an entire month.
And at my engagement banquet, when I was dragged through the mud and humiliated, not a single soul stood up for me.
Now I've run thousands of miles away just to turn screws on an assembly line.
Yet they take it for granted that I should send all my hard-earned money back home.
As if I was born owing them my entire life.
I barely slept a wink that night. The next day, my luck got even worse. During the warehouse inventory, I realized a box of our most common standard screws was missing. I checked the books 3 times, but the numbers just wouldn't add up. Finally, I found the whole box hidden behind the loading dock. Someone had just misplaced it. Hunty Kwang sighed in relief and said, It's a good thing you caught that early.
Otherwise, if we were short a box for the shipment,
Hu Grongsa would have lost his temper again. Just as I finished dragging the heavy box back,
someone from the main office called for me.
The accountant handed me a money order.
She said, The boss said you did all right this month.
So he's giving you half of your allowance? I stared at that allowance. It was barely a few dollars. I suddenly felt like laughing.
Slap me in the face, then hand me a piece of candy.
Hoo. Bonfai sure knows how to play people.
After the final shipment went out that evening, I walked past the tiny post office by the factory gates, and despite everything, my feet stopped. I counted the cash in my hands over and over.
My salary, the allowance, and the extra money I made from selling that clearance stock last time.
It all added up to $123. It was nowhere near the $300 they wanted, but I still went ahead and sent $100 back home. My fingers shook as I filled out the form.
Not because I couldn't part with the money, but because I was furious with myself.
I knew most of this money wouldn't even be used for anything good.
I'm just not strong enough yet. I'm not strong enough to completely cut ties with that family. When I stepped out of the post office,
the night was pitch black. Roadside stalls were selling stir-fried noodles, the greasy smoke hanging heavy in the air.
I hadn't eaten all day,
and my stomach was cramping with hunger. But I still forced myself to split my remaining cash into 2 piles.
One went right into my pocket, and the other I stuffed deep inside my shoe, under the insole.
Back in the dorm, Ling Simon was sitting there with her legs crossed, clipping her nails.
Yeah, noted.
How much? Just 100?
She rolled her eyes. I knew it. I didn't say a word, seeing me look so miserable.
She let out a sigh. She took the half-marinated egg she'd been saving in her lunchbox and dropped it into mine.
Here, Boss Yan.
I looked down at that half-egg, and my eyes suddenly stung with tears. In all my time here in Shenzhen, the first person to actually show me any real warmth wasn't even my family. It was this bubbly girl I'd barely just met.
I buried my face in my food, thinking down that half-egg.
It tasted incredibly salty. The next day at noon, the security guard called out to me again.
Yak Shohei, phone call.
The moment I heard the word phone, my chest tightened.
Nobody ever called me on the factory's payphone unless it was an emergency.
I ran over and picked it up.
Sure enough,
it was my mother.
Her voice came screaming through the receiver. Why did you only send 100? Where's the other 200? I gripped the receiver so hard my knuckles turned white. I need to eat too, and I have a fate for my dorm. Aren't you in the big city? The big city is overflowing with cash. Why are you being so stingy over a few pennies?
I almost laughed out loud.
So that's how she saw it.
To her, money in the big city just grew on trees.
All I had to do was bend over and scoop it up. I don't have any. If you don't have it, go borrow it. Can your brother's wedding wait? Chonhe, don't you forget. You're going to need your family's backing in the future.
In that exact moment, something inside my heart snapped hard.
My voice suddenly went dead cold. I don't need this family. There was a sudden, stunned silence on the other end. What did you just say? I said, I don't need any of you. I couldn't listen to another word. I slammed the phone down. Even the security guard gasped in shock. I stood frozen in place, my chest heaving violently. It wasn't that. It didn't hurt. It was that I had heard enough. Instead, a numb clarity washed over me. I finally realized one thing. The scariest thing in this world isn't being poor. It's when someone shamelessly treats your life as a stepping stone to climb out of their own mess. And I can't keep living like this. I need to make money. I'll hustle hard and make money the right way. That way, no one can control me, and no one will ever dare treat me like a cash cow again. Just as I clenched my fists and turned around, another car pulled up at the factory gates. It was that same black Santana. This time, as the car door opened, I spotted that man instantly. His white shirt sleeves were rolled up, his face expressionless, his gaze even colder and calmer than before. He got out of the car holding a stack of invoices, and Hu Guangfa was already rushing over to greet him with a sycophantic smile. Boss Shen, we're really counting on you to look out for us this time. I stood by the steps, frozen, as the man walked past me. He seemed to catch the lingering tension of my phone call in the air. He gave me a brief, casual look. His gaze was cool and detached, but somehow, it felt like he had seen right through all my desperation. I instinctively wanted to look away, but he had already shifted his gaze, walking straight into the office, only leaving behind a few cool, quiet words as our shoulders brushed. Your heart isn't hard enough. You can't do business. I froze right where I stood. It was as if he was talking about himself, and yet it felt like he was talking about me. Shen Sabai's words were like a thorn, piercing deeply into my heart. Your heart isn't hard enough. You can't do business. I used to think I was already tough enough. I was brave enough to flip the table at my own engagement party, brave enough to go south to Shenzhen all by myself, and brave enough to risk my entire life savings to buy up over stock. But compared to real business people, my so-called toughness is nothing but forced bravado, put on because I had no choice. But their strength, theirs comes from calculating every risk, weighing the losses, and still having the guts to charge forward. The gap between us is just too wide. Before I could even finish digesting that bitter truth, trouble found me first. Bright and early the next morning, the moment I walked into the warehouse, that Zhuang frantically gestured to me with her eyes, whispering, "The boss wants to see you." My heart sank. Sure enough, the moment I stepped into his office, Hu Kuangfer's face was dark as a thundercloud. Several invoices were slammed across his desk. Boxin's shipment yesterday. Why was it 30 minutes late? I froze. But it wasn't my fault. If it wasn't you, then who? He slapped the papers in a row on the desk. You're the one who verified the packing list. You're the one who supervised the loading. The client is already calling to complain. They said it threw off their entire assembly schedule. I opened my mouth, desperate to explain. Those 30 minutes yesterday, it was because we were short on loaders at the last minute. The flatbed trucks were completely blocked at the gate. But the second I looked into Hu Guangfa's eyes, I knew. He didn't actually care whose fault it was. He was just using this as an excuse to put me in my place. And sure enough, his next words were, "Your mind's been getting a little too restless lately. You're not cut out for the warehouse anymore." A cold dread washed over me. Starting today, you're going back to the assembly line. The office fell dead silent. It was so quiet. I could hear the rustle of the accountant flipping pages in the ledger. Guangfa leaned back in his chair, staring at me like I was just a disobedient piece of machinery. Chai, I've always been fair to people who actually put in the work, but you need to know your place. What you need to learn right now isn't how to be clever. It's how to keep your head down and work. I stood there, frozen. After a long pause, I finally whispered, "Understood." I didn't beg. I didn't make a scene. And I certainly didn't cry, like they probably expected me to. Because I knew, the more I fought back, the more satisfied he'd be. All he wanted was to teach me a lesson, to show me that no matter how smart I think I am, it only takes one word from him to kick me off the warehouse floor and throw me right back onto the assembly line. That is what power looks like. As I turned to leave, Auntie Guang was standing right by the door. She looked at me, sighed softly, and said, "I told you so." I just nodded, keeping quiet. When I got back to the workshop, Lula Ling, the shift leader, glanced at me, unable to hide his smug smirk. Well, well, look who's back. The others around him started snickering too. See? What did I tell you? You think the warehouse is that easy to get into? And here you thought you were about to fly high. I sat back down at my old station. As I picked up the screwdriver, The half-healed callus on the web of my hand began to rub raw against the handle once more. The pain was sharp and real, but it actually made me feel more grounded.
The more Hu Guangfa tries to push me down, the more it proves I am on the right track. The warehouse and order tracking? That's where the real secrets lie.
And he isn't afraid of me failing. He is terrified of how fast I learn.
That afternoon,
The workshop was stifling, hot as a sauna.
I kept tightening screws like a machine, but my ears were strained, listening to every sound outside.
Right before the shift ended,
A sudden commotion broke out at the entrance.
someone was here to pick up an order. I looked up, and there he was, Shen Sobai. He wasn't wearing his usual white shirt today. Instead, he wore a light gray, lightweight jacket, holding a pickup slip in his hand.
2 loaders followed behind as Hu Guangfa personally escorted him, grinning so hard the wrinkles on his face practically creased.
Don't you worry, Mr. Shen. This batch of standard parts is top tier.
Absolutely no delays for your upcoming shipments.
Sensobai barely offered a smile. He just glanced at the cargo, then looked back down at his paperwork. I shouldn't have been distracted. But at that exact moment,
An new apprentice next to me let his hand slip. He knocked over a whole box of screws,
sending them rolling all over the floor.
Supervisor Luau went ballistic on the spot.
Are you blind? The young worker's face turned pale with fear. He scrambled to his knees and started picking them up, fumbling around in a panic. But the more he tried, the bigger the mess became. I instinctively glanced at the different types of screws scattered on the ground, and suddenly, my heart skipped a beat. Wait, they're mixed up. Even though they look like the same screws, the length difference is so tiny. It's almost impossible to tell with the naked eye.
But if they get mixed into this shipment, there is going to be a massive issue during assembly later.
Almost purely on instinct, I jumped to my feet.
Thuk rushed over and grabbed the young worker's hand. Stop picking them up. Supervisor Luau glared at me, barking, "What the hell is wrong with you?"
I completely ignored him, squatting down to pick up one of the screws and holding it up to the light. This isn't an S17. It's a 19. The workers nearby all froze.
Supervisor Rara was stunned too. What?
I picked out a few other screws and set them aside. The length is off by 8 millimeters, and the thread pitch is different too. If these get packed into the shipment,
The entire batch will have to be reworked later.
this time, it wasn't just the workshop that fell dead silent. Even Hu Guangfa and Shen Subai, standing by the door, looked over. Supervisor Loa, still half doubting, grabbed a screw to compare them. His face turned pale instantly. They really are mixed up.
The smile froze on Hu Guangfa's face, and he rushed over.
He began furiously cursing the young worker, while urgently ordering the others to double-check the batch.
Shen Sabai stood a few paces away, casting a glance in my direction.
This time, his gaze was far more intense than before. It wasn't just a passing glance. He was truly looking at me. He didn't say a word, but I could feel it. He had marked me in his mind. It took nearly 40 minutes to re-inspect the entire shipment. As they were heading out the door,
Although Hu Guangfa's expression was incredibly tense.
but on the surface, I still had to force myself to play along. Luckily, we caught it early.
Shen Sabai gave a faint, indifferent grunt.
Then, he turned and walked away.
As he passed by me, the short May done.
His steps paused for a brief moment. You've been working on the assembly line. For nothing. I suddenly looked up, but he was already far away. His voice was so quiet that only I heard it, but my heart still pounded fiercely. After work that night, I went to throw out the trash at the factory gate. I happened to see that Santana was still parked outside. The driver wasn't around. Only Shen Uzbai was standing next to the car. He was looking down, lighting a cigarette. The flame flickered briefly in the darkness. I should have walked around him, but for some reason, my footsteps slowed down. He looked up and saw me, showing no surprise. He just asked flatly, "Do you know how to inspect goods?" I hesitated, wanting to say I knew a little, and that with a bit of direction, I could tell the 2 types of screws apart. But in the end, I didn't say a word. He stared at me for a couple of seconds, as if trying to confirm something. Then he finally spoke. "Do you plan on staying in Chongqing forever?" The question was so sudden. My chest tightened. "No." Slipped out of my mouth before I could think. He seemed to smile. Or maybe he didn't. "Then don't let yourself get trapped here." With that, he stubbed out his cigarette, got into the car, and drove off. The taillights flashed in the dark and soon disappeared. I stood frozen in place, still holding the trash bin. But my heart was already miles away. Don't let yourself get trapped here. Those words cut deeper than anything else, because I knew he was right. Shuching was never going to be my final stop. It wasn't even a stepping stone. It was just where I learned how the game was played. And my real opportunity? That lay outside of Shanqing. First thing the next morning, a call came into the factory. The security guard called out my name, Yan Chonhei, saying someone was looking for me. As I walked out, I kept wondering if it was my family again. But when I reached the gate, standing under the tree was actually Shen Bai's driver. He handed me a business card. "Boss Shen said that if you're willing, you can head over after work tonight." I took it from him,
my palms warming up slightly. The card was incredibly simple. It only had a few words on it. Subai Trading. Shen, Subai. I stared down at the card, suddenly feeling like someone had just given my destiny a gentle nudge. I had no idea where the road ahead would lead, but at least I could finally see the path. I kept that card in my pocket all day,
pressing it close to my chest until it felt burning hot.
as the screws flew past my hands on the assembly line. I couldn't help but keep wondering, should I go tonight or shouldn't I? Going could be my big chance, but it could also be a trap. If I didn't go, I'd probably just keep rotting here in Chongqing until Hu Guangfa wore me down into a mindless factory girl who only knew how to tighten screws. I didn't want that. So the moment the shift end bell rang, I didn't even bother changing out of my uniform. I just grabbed my most presentable jacket from my woven sack and hurried out. Lin Xiaomen chanced after me, shouting, "Where are you going?" "I've got some business." "What kind of business?" I paused, then turned back and smiled to see what real money looks like. The address was written on the back of the card, and it wasn't far. It was inside an old office building in Fujian. It was my first time stepping into a place like that. The building was dated, with narrow corridors and peeling, yellowed walls. But the moment I stepped inside, it felt worlds away from the factory. There was no noise of machinery, no greasy smell, only the sound of phones ringing and papers rustling. A few young people were sitting behind desks, which were piled high with contracts and receipts. Sample catalogs, cardboard boxes, and customs forms were piled high against the wall. The place looked a bit messy,
Yet, has this incredible sense of momentum.
it felt like everything was constantly rushing forward. When someone led me inside, Shen Sabai was sitting there, looking over some order sheets. He was dressed even more casually today. A white shirt and dark trousers, with his sleeves rolled up to his forearms. A half-empty cup of herbal tea sat on the edge of his desk. He didn't bother with small talk when he saw me. He just looked up and said, "Sit." I sat down, keeping my back perfectly straight. "Do you know why I asked for you?" he asked. I thought about it for a moment, then said, "Because I know how to evaluate goods." He looked up at me, a faint glimmer of approval in his eyes. "What else?" "Because I'm not content with tightening screws on an assembly line forever." This time, he actually let out a small laugh. It was subtle. "You're even sharper than I thought." He slid a document toward me. "Take a look." I looked down. It was a list of delivery orders and price quotes from several small factories. There were standard parts, plastic components, and even a batch of radio recorder casings. I read through them slowly, but with absolute focus. I had seen all of these parts back at Chongqing, but seeing them laid out on paper for the first time, I finally understood the connection between them. Who was short on stock? Who had a surplus? Which factory had low prices but slow delivery times? And which one had small order volumes but quick payment returns? It was like a giant web. It turned out factories didn't just operate on their own. They were all interconnected, feeding into one another. And the traders, they stood right in the center of this web. If someone was short on stock, they supplied it. If there was an urgent order, they took it. If someone tried to force prices down, they routed the order elsewhere. They didn't manufacture a single thing, yet they walked away with most of the profit. When I finally looked up, my impression must have completely changed by then. Shen Sobai just looked at me, in no rush to speak. It was as if he was deliberately waiting for me to figure it out on my own. After a long silence, I finally spoke up, slowly. "You're not just sourcing goods for Chongqing, are you?" "Of course not. You're flipping goods for tons of different factories. And it's not just flipping them either." He tapped his fingers on the desk. "Sometimes it's about sourcing the right stock. Sometimes it's about hoarding it to drive up the price. And sometimes it's about saving someone's life." My heart skipped a beat. Saving lives. I'd already seen how Hu Guangfa squeezed his clients by holding back their supplies. Whoever holds the inventory holds their lives in their hands. Whoever can deliver the goods when people are at their most desperate is the one who makes the real money. Sensual Bai stared at me. His voice was completely flat. "What you learned at Chongqing is just how one single factory operates. The real money in Shenzhen isn't made inside any single factory. It's made in the spaces between them." Those words hit me like a bolt of lightning, instantly shattering the final layer of fog in my mind. Suddenly, it all made perfect sense. Why those leftover goods from Chongqing could be resold by street vendors for such a high markup? Why the exact same box of screws could command vastly different prices depending on the day? Why Hu Guangfa wasn't the hardest worker, yet he was easily the richest man in the factory? Because real money is never made by just putting your head down and working in one place. It's made in the gaps between people, between different goods, and by exploiting the gaps in time. I sat there for a long time, speechless, but my chest felt like it was on fire. Shen Subai poured me a glass of water. "Do you get it now?" I nodded. "Then do you still think Chongqing is worth staying at?" "No, it's not." "How much is Hu Guangfa even paying you?" I named a figure. His expression didn't even flicker when he heard it. "Too low," he said.
I could only let out a bitter smile.
You know I'm starting from the bottom. You know I'm at the bottom, yet you're still bringing me along? I looked up at him, my voice steady.
Because I have no other way out.
That's the honest truth. It's not that I don't want to leave.
It's just that I don't have the leverage.
No money, no connections, no backing.
I don't even know the main roads in Shenzhen yet. If I just leave blindly, I might actually starve to death. Shen Subai was silent for 2 seconds. Suddenly, he handed me another order sheet. Tomorrow is Saturday.
Shongshan only works a half day.
Come with me to the markets. Where to?
And 2 small assembly plants.
My fingers tightened.
Can I really go? Didn't you say you wanted to see what money looks like in the outside world? My heart skipped a beat. He said it so casually, as if he were just asking if I wanted another bite of food. But I knew exactly what this trip meant for me. It meant I could finally crawl out of that deep well.
A factory. Just a little bit to see what the sky looks like on the outside.
I swallowed hard. Why are you taking me?
The moment I asked, I felt a little foolish.
But I still wanted to know. Shen Subai didn't answer right away. He leaned back in his chair. The light fell across his brow, making him look even colder and more composed. Because you have a sharp eye, and because you're poor. And then because you're poor, I froze.
Poor people know best that when an opportunity passes them by,
if they fail to grab it, they'll regret it for the rest of their lives.
He said it so calmly,
As if he were talking about someone else. But somehow,
I felt he wasn't just talking about me.
the next day, I got into a Santana for the first time. The moment the car drove out of the factory gates, I watched through the window as Sunqing's dusty gray factory buildings slowly receded into the distance. A strange feeling suddenly washed over me. For someone like me, if I hadn't come out to see the world, I would have had to leave that place sooner or later anyway. Huangshangbei was terrifyingly alive. The roadsides were overflowing with electronic components, videotapes, cassette players, and the shouts of calculator vendors rose and fell in waves. I used to think the factory was complicated enough. But coming here, I realized the factory is just one tiny link in the chain. Here, some sell parts. Some dump second-hand goods. Some run smuggling routes to Hong Kong. Some specialize in rush orders. And some can move an entire shipment from one end of town to the other with nothing but their words. Money changes hands here faster than the traffic moves. I followed Shen Subai into a small shop. The moment the boss saw him, his face lit up with a grin. Mr. Shen, do you want to add more to that batch of ceramic caps from last night? Not yet, Shen Subai said, flipping through the sample catalog. His voice was completely flat. I'm not looking for cheap. I want reliability. Standing beside him, I listened intently and asked, isn't saving money the top priority? Delivering on time and making fewer mistakes. That is what's truly valuable. Later, we went to 2 assembly plants in Baguling. One of them was desperately rushing an order, and the entire workshop was about to boil over. The boss was scratching his head in absolute despair. And when he saw Shen Subai, it was like seeing a savior. Mr. Shen, if you don't give me that batch of screws today, I am completely ruined. Shen Subai wasn't in any rush to answer. He just looked down at his watch. The price is what we agreed on last night. The boss gritted his teeth and said, deal. By the time we walked out of the factory, I was still completely dazed. The exact same screws were stacked box by box back in Shenzhen, looking utterly worthless, but in the hands of someone who desperately needs them. They're a literal lifeline. In the car, I couldn't help but ask, did you know all along he'd be this desperate today? Shen Subai tilted his head and glanced at me. It's not about knowing. He calculated it so precisely that my heart skipped a violent beat. How do you calculate it? By looking at the orders they're lining up next. By looking at their shipments over the last few days. By checking if their workshop has added extra shifts. By seeing if they're gambling with the client's delivery deadline. If they win the bet, they rake it in. But if they lose, they'll have to beg someone to save them. He paused, then added, doing business isn't about waiting for things to happen before you scramble for a solution. Before trouble even strikes, you must already be in position. I listened in silence. At that moment, it suddenly hit me. The 19 yuan I made earlier on clearance stock was absolutely nothing. That was just scraping by. But Shen Subai, he was orchestrating a grand play. For the first time, I truly saw what it meant to make money from a higher vantage point. On drive back, the setting sun streamed through the car window. Row after row of factory buildings swept past us. I stared outside, my heart racing, as if a floodgate had burst open.
Shenzhen wasn't just a place for me to survive.
It could actually turn my life around, as long as I was fast enough, steady enough, and ruthless enough. When we pulled up to the factory gates, Shen Subai handed me the quotation sheet Ishodara had put together. Take a look at this when you have some time. I took it from him. My throat tightened. Well, I even understand this. Maybe not right now. But what about the future? He looked at me, his voice calm, yet utterly certain. In the future, you'll understand it better than most. I looked down and clutched that stack of papers to my chest, as if holding something burning hot, yet incredibly precious. Just as I was about to step out of the car, Shen Subai suddenly stopped me. Langchon. I turned back. He looked at me, his gaze intensely calm.
A place like Shunshen?
Is fine for learning the ropes.
But relying on luck won't get you anywhere.
If you really want to climb to the top, stop selling yourself short. I froze. For years, no one had ever spoken to me that way. We weren't trying to flatter me or sweet-talk me.
They were dead serious when they told me.
You can climb higher.
When I stepped out of the car,
It felt like I was stepping onto the starting line of a whole new path, and I knew there was no going back. Ever since I got back from surveying the market that day, something in me completely changed. It wasn't a change other people could see, but I knew, deep down, that my eyes saw things differently. Back in Chunshang, all I saw was a screw, a plastic casing, or a batch of surplus stock. But now, I see the factories and the orders tied to them. The rush orders, the excess inventory, the adhesives, the paint, and who would be desperate enough to pay double for this exact box of goods? I stopped thinking of screws as insignificant. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The smaller the component, the more critical it is to the entire assembly line. Take a cassette player. It can still work if it's missing a button. But if it's missing just one key-spec screw, the entire machine can't even be put together. Screws are easy to overlook, but the more overlooked something is, the easier it is for people to underestimate it. And what people underestimate is usually where the biggest loopholes are hidden. I started tracking the most common standard part models, like 17, 19, M3, and M5, figuring out which went into which machine, which client placed the biggest orders, and who was always placing last-minute rush orders. I even memorized the exact packaging styles of different factories. Ling Xiaoman noticed I barely slept at night anymore. She'd stand by my bed, clutching her pillow, and yell, like, "Zhang, if you keep pulling all-nighters like this, you won't even live to see the money. You're going to drop dead." I kept looking down at my quote sheet. "I won't drop dead," I muttered. She snapped, "What on earth are you looking at anyway?" I tossed the paper to the edge of the bed. "Screws." Lin Xiaoman rolled her eyes hard on the spot. "Other girls look for a man, and you are staring at screws. You are seriously destined to never get rich off a man. You can only make your own fortune." Couldn't help but laugh.
Well, making my own fortune is much more secure.
She froze for a second, then burst out laughing too. That's actually true. But I didn't expect that. Before I could even make my move, the people from my hometown would track me down first. That afternoon at lunchtime, I was queuing up for food in the cafeteria when I suddenly heard a commotion outside.
where is Liang Chunhei?
I knew that voice all too well. So well that my back tensed up the second I heard it.
I turned around to look.
Jude Cha was actually standing at the cafeteria entrance, and right beside him was my brother Lao and Jane Fu. The two of them looked like they had dressed up on purpose. Dua Sang's hair was slicked back and shiny. Juduk sat. Lang Jinfu was even sporting a brand new pair of leather shoes. But standing among the bustling crowd in Shenzhen, they still instantly stood out as country bumpkins, practically dripping with greed. Ling Xiaoban was the first to lose her temper. Who on earth are they? I slammed my lunchbox onto the table and stood up. It was clear they had asked around all the way here to find me. The moment he saw me, Judah Kang's expression instantly became complicated. First, he looked a bit surprised, probably not expecting me to actually make a place for myself in this factory. Then, he put on that familiar, sickeningly arrogant look, as if the moment he opened his mouth, I would go back to being that same old Lang Chunhei he could easily control. Chunhei. He took a couple of steps closer and lowered his voice, intentionally trying to sound intimate. Why haven't you sent a letter back home? I stared at him coldly. Whether I write home or not is none of your business.
来敬父抢民一臂。
What kind of attitude is that?
We came all this way to find you, because we're doing you a favor. I almost laughed out loud. Doing me a favor? When they dragged me through the mud at the engagement party, where was that respect then?
邱德强起了指头。
Acting as if he was handing down grand charity. Tane, let's just let bygones be bygones. I was young and foolish back then. But now, I've finally figured things out. You're still the most honest and reliable one. A crowd had already gathered around the cafeteria entrance. I knew exactly why he chose a place like this. He wanted to embarrass me in public, just to claw back some of his own dignity. I crossed my arms and asked coldly, "And what exactly have you figured out?" Seeing that I didn't lose my temper right away, they looked even more smug. I've realized the girl from that family in town is completely useless. A capable girl like you is much better suited for marriage. Now that you've seen the world in Shenzhen, it's still not too late for us to get back together and make it official. Beside me, Lin Xiaoman almost choked and spat out her food. My brother Lao Tianfu immediately chimed in. Exactly. It's no way for a woman to live, drifting around out here all by herself forever. At least we know Zhou Deshan's background inside out. Go back home, get married, and help out your family. Wouldn't that be perfect? The two of them played off each other beautifully. One treating me like a cheap backup option, and the other treating me like a personal cash cow. I stared at them, finding the whole thing ridiculously absurd. People around us were already whispering. Some didn't know the backstory, and actually thought he was some devoted man chasing his love across 1,000 miles. Too bad for them.
They picked the wrong person. I slammed my lunchbox onto a nearby table and took a step forward.
Judak, do you remember what you said on the day of our engagement?
His face stiffened instantly. I smiled, keeping my voice low.
But it was loud enough for everyone around to hear. You said a woman like me wouldn't even survive outside the village?
You even claimed it wasn't that you dumped me.
But that you were just trying to save my face. The cafeteria entrance fell dead silent.
Ju Dasung's face visibly started to turn green with embarrassment. I stared him dead in the eye and spat out every single word.
And now that I've survived? What I've survived. You crawl back and say I am the most down-to-earth one after all. What's the matter? Are the sewing machine and bicycle from the town station chief's niece no longer good enough for you?
The crowd immediately erupted into uncontrollable laughter.
Zhou Dakshang's face went completely green.
Patently, Liang Jianfu snapped. What nonsense are you talking?
I whipped my head around to look at him.
Nonsense? Oh, brother. Do you want me to repeat, word for word, what you and Mom said in that room back then?
Didn't you say the Zhou family had to pay every single penny of the bride price?
That without it, you wouldn't have the money to build a house and get married?
Didn't you say I was just a useless money drain anyway?
And that I'd end up belonging to another family sooner or later?
So as long as you could sell me for a good price, nothing else mattered? As soon as those words left my mouth, the onlookers watching the drama were completely stunned.
No one expected that this wasn't some romantic reunion at all, but rather, two greedy men ganging up to bleed a helpless woman dry.
Liang Jianfu's face instantly turned the color of raw liver. He lunged forward, trying to grab me. Shut up. I took a sharp step back, my voice suddenly turning ice cold.
Don't touch me! At that moment, even I could hear the sheer venom in my own voice.
Zhou
Dakshang was still trying desperately to save face.
Chunhao, stop making a scene.
I came here today with sincere intentions.
Sincere? I scoffed. Sincere my foot. You saw that I finally got on my feet in Shenzhen,
And now you want to crawl back and leech off me?
I took a step forward, staring directly into his pale face.
Listen to me closely, Zhou Dakshang.
It wasn't you who dumped me back then.
It was me who dumped you.
Now, don't think for a second that I have to take you back just because you regret it.
Who the hell do you think you are?
In an instant, the cafeteria entrance fell so quiet you could hear a pin drop.
Ju Daxiao had never had a pride torn to shreds like this by me before.
His face went pale, then flushed with embarrassment. Finally, flying into a rage from his shame, he spat out.
Like Trenton, don't think you're actually somebody just because you've been hanging around this factory for a few days.
I looked at him coldly. At least I act more like a human than you do. The second those words left my mouth, someone nearby burst out laughing. Then, the entire crowd erupted into a wave of snickers.
This time, Zhou Dakshang couldn't bear to stay a second longer.
His face burning with humiliation. He turned on his heel and stormed off.
Yan Qingfo gave me a vicious glare
and quickly scrambled to catch up with him.
The two of them looked as pathetic as cheap actors kicked off a stage.
Slowly, the crowd began to disperse.
没想我们十拉豪道的管。
Damn, that was a real eye-opener.
Now I finally get what you meant by trouble.
I bent down to pick up my lunchbox,
But my hands were still shaking slightly.
not out of fear.
But from pure rage.
I was furious that even at this point, they still thought they could just walk all over me.
Ling Xiaomen looked at me.
Her voice surprisingly soft for once. Are you going to be okay?
I took a deep breath. Yeah, I'm fine.
I have to be. Because from now on, this is only the beginning. If I want to climb to the top, it's inevitable that people will smell the blood and come clawing at me. When I got off work that evening,
I saw Shen Subai at the factory gates again.
he was talking to his driver.
When he saw me, his eyes lingered on my face for 2 seconds.
My face must have looked terrible.
I didn't expect him to initiate the conversation.
I froze for a second before replying. I just ran into 2 mad dogs.
He seemed to understand and didn't press further, only asking calmly, "Did they bite you?"
Then why are you shaking? I looked down at my hands and gave a bitter smile.
Out of anger. Shen Subai fell silent for 2 seconds.
Then he suddenly said, "There will be more of this in the future." I looked up at him. Relatives, old acquaintances, competitors, anyone who wants a piece of you.
As long as you're climbing up, you can't avoid them.
Then what should I do?
Don't be afraid of them coming. He looked at me, his voice so steady, it was almost cold. The only thing to fear is your own soft heart. Those words were like a bucket of ice water, completely waking me up from the overwhelming emotions of earlier today.
Zhou Dakshang isn't scary. Liang Jianfu isn't scary either.
What's terrifying is that they keep coming back, over and over. Will I eventually go soft because of family ties or old memories?
And having my soft heart is the costliest mistake you can make.
I fell silent for a moment, then suddenly looked up and asked him,
Shen Subai, what do you think is the safest, most stable business?
He glanced at me, probably not expecting me to ask something like that at a time like this. But he still answered. Absolute necessities. Low-key. Unremarkable. but things that nobody can live without. Instantly, the most common standard hardware parts flashed through my mind. Screws, washers, tiny, unremarkable accessories, yet indispensable to everyone. A string inside my heart suddenly snapped tight. Maybe I shouldn't just stay here in Shangshan, watching others make a fortune. Instead, I need to find a way to secure the most unremarkable, yet stable business first. Others might look down on screws as worthless, but I don't just see a single screw. I see a gold mine. After I publicly put Zhou Dakchang and Liang Jinfu in their place, I thought things would quiet down for a while, but I overestimated them, and I underestimated just how persistent real leeches can be. Not even 3 days later, the security guard came over again, calling out to me. Lan Shune, someone's here for you. The moment I looked up, I could barely suppress the wave of irritation rising inside me, but when I walked to the factory gate, I was taken aback. The person standing there this time wasn't Zhou Dakchang. It was my mother, Wan Geeksang. She was standing at the doorway, clutching a worn-out old bundle in her hands, still wearing those same old cloth shoes caked in yellow mud. Her hair was a windswept, messy tangle. The moment she saw me, her eyes welled up with tears. That shaky cry of a chunya sent a sharp pang straight through my chest. After all, she was still my mother. Even if she always favored my brother, even if she used me to get a bride price, even if every single letter she sent was only ever to demand money. But still, for a fleeting moment, I remembered how, when I was a kid, she'd always bundle me up in our only thick winter coat first. But that momentary ache didn't even last. Because a second later, my brother Liang Jinfu lunged out from behind her. A cigarette was dangling from his fingers, and his face was written all over with impatience. Finally found you, he spat. Any shred of soft-heartedness that had just surfaced was instantly snuffed out. What are you two doing here? I asked coldly. My mother rushed forward and grabbed my arm. Johnny, your brother is in trouble. You have to help the family. I looked down at her hand. It was rough and dry, gripping me so tightly. She used to grab me like this all the time, not because she was afraid of losing me, but because she was afraid I wouldn't obey. I slowly pulled my hand back.
给流量眷属卡林拉来。我报了白纸币，想欢的看他们都
To get the house built first, but now they're demanding the money. And if we don't pay up, construction is going to stop. Hurry up and give us 500. 500. He demanded it without a single shred of hesitation, as if I weren't just a factory worker earning a fixed, meager wage, but some gold bars hidden away in their cellar. My mother stood beside him, wiping away her tears. Chohei, Mom knows things are hard for you, but your brother worked so hard to arrange this marriage. We can't let it fall through. You're in Shenzhen now. You've seen the world. You must have more ways to get money than we do. Listening to them, I just found it incredibly laughable. Every single time they show up, they have a brand new excuse. But at the end of the day, it all boils down to one thing. You have to drain yourself dry just to pave the way for your brother. I looked up and stared right at Liang Jinfu. I remember giving you 100 last time. Where is it? His eyes flickered nervously. It's spent. Where do you think? Why do you care? Do you think running this household is free? I laughed. I actually let out a cold, bitter laugh. Liang Jiangfu, you really have some nerve. My laughter made him snap in embarrassment. His voice shot up instantly. Yeah, I said it. So what? You're a Liang. Supporting this family is your duty. My duty? I locked my eyes onto him. My voice grew colder by the second. Since we were kids, every piece of new clothing went to you first. Every single egg on the table was yours. When we couldn't afford school fees, you're the ones who forced me to drop out, and you're the ones who tried to sell me off for a bride price. Now I'm all alone in Shenzhen, cramming into an 8-person dorm room, working day and night. But you just open your mouth and demand 500, and you have the audacity to talk to me about duty? More and more people were passing by the entrance now. Quite a few workers slowed their pace, listening in. I knew they were staring, but I didn't care. I was done holding it in. I was absolutely done. My mother started to panic. She tried to stop me, keeping her voice low. Kunse, keep your voice down. Don't make us a laughingstock. A laughingstock. I stared at her. Mom, I've been the joke of this family for a long time. At the engagement banquet, when the whole village watched me get dragged through the mud, did you care about embarrassment then? Her face went completely pale. Mom stammered. That's just what you think. Either way, it was my face that was dragged through the mud. Not your precious sons. Her lips trembled. She couldn't even form a coherent sentence. Deep down, my heart ached too. But as much as it hurt, if I don't say these things today, I'll never have the courage to say them again. Seeing that things aren't going his way, Liang Jingfu decides to throw off all pretense. Cut the crap and stop bringing up the past. If you don't cough up the cash, Mom and I aren't leaving today. I want to see just how heartless you can be to your own family. With that, he plops himself right down by the entrance, acting like a total deadbeat. I'm so furious. My vision starts to go dark. This is my brother. A tyrant at home, the total moocher outside. He always expects me to clean up his messes. Always expects Mom to bail him out. People around us are starting to whisper. And even the security guard's brow is furrowed deep. I take a deep breath, and suddenly, I calm down. At a moment like this, I can't let myself stoop to their level. I look at my mother and say slowly, "Mom, I can support you in your old age." She phrases, "I can also send you money during the holidays." Just as a glint of hope lights up in her eyes, my next words, slash it right down. But starting today, I won't pay a single penny of Liang Zhenfu's debts ever again.
亮剑红腹，利刺的飞。
林琼娜善用啊。
For the first time in my life, I flat out cut him off. Your house, your wife, your dignity. Go earn them yourself. I am not your ATM, nor am I the Liang family's personal blood bag. None of you will ever use me to bail him out again. He's completely speechless, his face turning purple with rage. My mother's tears immediately start spilling over.
Chane, how can you say such things?
He's your brother. I look at her, suddenly feeling utterly exhausted. Mom, I'm your daughter too. The moment those words leave my mouth, she is completely stunned. I see the panic and guilt in her eyes, as if a corner of her carefully kept facade has been violently ripped away. But it's only a fleeting moment. In the end, she still subconsciously turns her head to look at her son. In that single moment, everything became crystal clear. Some favoritism is carved right into their bones. No matter how much I cried or threw a fit, I could never change it. I took a step back, drawing a clear line between myself and them. Just go home. If anything happens to you in the future, I'll still take care of you. But I am not lifting a single finger for him. If you ever come back to the factory to make a scene, I'll call the police. The moment I said police, my brother's face went completely pale. My mother was utterly terrified. He quickly grabbed his arm, pulling him back. He probably never expected in a million years that I would ever speak to my own family in this tone. And he definitely didn't think I would actually have the guts to slam the door in their faces. As he walked away in tears, he kept turning back to look at me. That look of his made my chest feel incredibly heavy, but I didn't go after him. Not even a single step, because I knew if I took even one step out that door today, he would drag me right back down for the rest of my life. Once the crowd finally dispersed, I stood by the factory gates for a long time, unable to move.
I didn't even notice when Lin Xiaomen ran over.
She was still clutching half a fried dough stick in her hand.
Are you okay?
I nodded.
But then shook my head.
She wanted to say something to comfort me, but in the end, she just stuffed that half-eaten dough stick into my hand. Here, eat something first. I looked down at the dough stick in my hand, and suddenly my eyes welled up with tears. Not because I felt wronged, but because I finally, truly understood. From this day forward, there was no turning back for me. It wasn't that I didn't have a family anymore, but rather, I could never rely on them again. That night, I didn't go back to the dorms. I sat all by myself in the empty lot behind the factory. A few lonely stars hung over my head, while the workshop in the distance was still brightly lit. The wind blew past, carrying the smell of plastic and iron filings, but my mind has never been clearer. I can't spend the rest of my life working for someone else, and I can't survive on just a paycheck anymore. I need my own money, my own path, by my own ground to stand on. And right now, the only thing I truly understand is standard fasteners, screws. Just simple screws. The very things everyone else looks down on for being too small, too insignificant, and too slow to make a profit. But I know they're reliable. Nobody can live without them. If I do this right, the cash flow will be more solid than any flashy, high-profile business. As these thoughts race through my head, the sound of footsteps comes from behind. I turn around and see Shennis Buai standing nearby. The moonlight catches his shoulders, making him look even more quiet and detached than during the day. Why are you? I ask. Just passing by, he says casually. But I know there's no such thing as a coincidence. Like this. He takes a few steps closer and looks down at me. Did you cry? Then why are your eyes so red? I keep quiet. He doesn't press me for an answer either. He just stands beside me for a moment, then suddenly asks, "Have you figured it out yet? Your path, I mean." I look down at the gravel beneath my feet. After a long silence, I whisper, "A little bit, yeah." "Tell me about it," he says. "Well, I don't want to make money for other people anymore, and I don't want to rely on my family either, and I definitely don't want to stay stuck in Shunqing forever." I look up at the rows of brightly lit factories in the distance. Everyone thinks screws are worthless, but I believe they're worth everything, not just a single screw. But the path they lead to, whoever needs them has no choice but to buy them. Whoever can secure this supply chain will be the one who keeps moving forward. As I said this, my voice grew steadier. It didn't feel like I was just throwing out some vague idea. It felt like I was carving out my future path, step by step, right out of the darkness. Shen Subai listened, falling silent for 2 seconds. Then he said, "Not bad." Just 2 words. But the anxiety that had been gripping my heart suddenly eased by half. I knew he was taking me seriously. acknowledging that this wasn't just some sudden impulse, and that I actually understood how the game is played.
So, what should I do now? I asked. He looked at me, his tone completely flat. Don't be in a rush to start your own gig just yet. First, learn how to move orders.
Navigate the people, the prices, and the timing gaps. Learn how to get the goods flowing through your hands first, before you even think about building your own empire later. I nodded, etching every single word deep into my mind.
The wind blew, bringing a sudden chill. I wrapped my arms around myself and suddenly asked, Shensubai, why were you willing to show me those invoices in the first place? He glanced at me. His gaze in the night seemed even deeper than during the day. Because you're not the type of person who just whines when things get tough. Even while struggling, you keep your eyes on the road ahead.
I froze,
Those words felt so casual, yet they carried so much weight.
so heavy that for a moment, I didn't even know how to respond.
But he didn't wait for my response. He just said quietly, don't go back to Shunxing tomorrow.
My head snapped up.
What? Come to Sabai Trading. Start by moving orders with me. My heart skipped a violent beat. The night wind swept over, but suddenly I felt a rush of warmth surge through my entire body. This wasn't just some comforting words. It wasn't just a casual remark. A real door had just swung wide open. I looked at him, my throat tightening. Can I really do this?
Shen Sobai looked at me with a calmness in his eyes that was almost terrifying.
You had the courage to run all the way from Yangji village to Shenzhen. Is there really anything else you can't handle?
In that moment, looking at the man standing in front of me, I suddenly felt like the lights from the factories around us were shining further into the distance. I knew my first life had been trampled into the dirt at that engagement banquet.
But tonight, my second life was just beginning. Early the next morning, I carried my gunny sack straight to the Shunxing office. Hu Guangfa was sipping his tea.
When he saw me walk in, he didn't even bother to look up.
What? Want to go back to the warehouse now?
I placed my resignation slip on his desk.
Boss Hu, I'm resigning. The teacup in his hand froze midair.
He finally looked up at me. Resigning?
Yang Shalan, Yang, do you really think the outside world is paved with gold?
I stood up straight.
Whether it is or not, I'll find out for myself. He stared at me, the faint smirk on his face slowly fading. You learned a few tricks here at Shunxing, and now you think you can fly? Let me tell you something.
Without this place, you are absolutely nothing.
I knew those words all too well.
朱扎祥还在等。
My mother had said them too, just in different ways.
They all believed a woman couldn't survive without relying on someone else. Looking at Hu Guangfa, I suddenly smiled. Then, I guess I'll just have to go prove you wrong. His expression instantly darkened.
Your wages will be docked for absenteeism.
Fine. No warehouse subsidy? That's fine too.
He didn't seem to expect me to agree so readily. His face grew even uglier.
养出来的都就带5个崽子。
I grabbed the duplicate copy of my resignation slip from the desk, turned around, and walked out.
Right at the doorway, I paused for a second. Boss Hu, you've taught me one thing. He glared at me coldly.
That making money for others?
No matter how smart you are, you're still just a tool.
Saying that, I left without looking back.
Many people in the workshop were watching me.
Luoling clutched her notebook, sneering in that passive-aggressive way of hers.
Think people really think they're cut out to be the boss.
I completely ignored him.
Lin Shulman squeezed his way out of the crowd. His eyes were completely red. Are you really leaving? For real? Where are you going? To buy treating?
He opened his mouth to speak before finally giving me a hard slap on the shoulder. Fine, if you make it big out there. Don't you dare forget about me. I looked at him and nodded earnestly. I won't. I had pitifully few belongings with me. Just 2 changes of clothes, a ceramic
Think. And a curled up certificate of merit. But the moment I walked out of the main gates of Shunxing, my heart didn't feel empty at all. Instead, it felt like a heavy weight had finally been lifted.
A black Santana was parked right outside the factory gates.
Shansabai was standing by the car.
As soon as he saw me walk out, he simply asked, "All done?"
All done. Good, get in the car.
I didn't dare look back as I got in. But as the car pulled out of the factory gates, I still couldn't help but look back. Up by the second-floor office window,
He Guangfa was indeed standing there.
staring down at me through the glass,
As if staring at a piece of meat that had escaped his pot.
I stared right back at him, holding his gaze until the car made a turn, leaving that dreary gray factory building far behind.
Sensubai remained silent. Only after a long while did he ask quietly, "Sad
To leave.
I shook my head. No, I'm not sad to leave.
I'm just remembering every single person who ever stepped on me.
And keeping track of how I dragged myself out of there, step by step.
He glanced over at me. It's fine to remember, but don't keep looking back. I looked down at my palms, rubbed raw and red, and gave a quiet nod. Outside the window, the streets of Shenzhen flew past.
But my mind had never been clearer.
Starting today, I'm no longer just some small-town working girl from Shuncheng. I have to carve out a path of my own. It wasn't until my first day in trading that I realized.
It turns out closing deals isn't about running errands.
It's a battle of wits.
Who's desperate? Who's running short?
Who's bluffing because they're anxious?
Who actually has no stock? And who's just faking a price war?
You have to read them instantly. Ching dragged me around for 2 days straight.
My heels were blistered raw, but my mind only grew sharper.
We hit Hosanbei first,
then headed over to Bagling.
Before finally walking into a small tapper quarter assembly plant. The purchasing manager's name was Pan. He wore a gold watch and spoke with the calculating click of an abacus. Your price is too high.
Someone else out there already quoted me 7.8 cents.
Hearing this, Trung panicked.
Just as he was about to speak, I stopped him. I glanced at the teacup on Boss Pan's desk. The tea leaves had gone completely pale,
meaning he hadn't had a single second to refresh them all morning. Then I looked at the dust on his shoes. It was aluminum dust from the workshop floor. Foofy just rushed back from the assembly line.
Suddenly, I knew exactly what to do. Boss Pan,
you're not actually complaining about the price. You're just desperate. His hand froze. I pressed on. Your assembly line in the back is already running. What you need right now isn't to save 0.2 of a cent. It's whether you can actually get these machines assembled. Tonight, the guys offering a lower price might not deliver today, but we will. The office fell dead silent.
Boss Pan stared at me for a long moment before finally letting out a chuckle.
Well, aren't you an interesting girl?
Can you really deliver tonight?
I tilted my head and looked at Shen Xubai. He stood by the door, remaining silent, only giving a slight nod. My heart finally settled.
All right, we'll go with your price. And just like that, the first deal was done.
By the time we walked out of the factory,
the way Cheng looked at me had completely changed. Sister Liang,
how did you know the seam on his pants was split in the back? I could just tell.
How? Someone who isn't actually in a rush sits calmly?
But someone in a rush? They always have dust on their shoes.
Cheng stared at me, mouth agape,
before finally bursting into a laugh. No wonder Mr. Shen went out of his way to head up you.
The second order was even bigger.
A company was suddenly short on 3 types of standard parts.
The volume wasn't massive, but it was tied to an urgent order for an out-of-town client.
They had already found another supplier.
But that supplier was dragging their feet.
Shen Xubai called and tossed it to me.
You handle this.
My palms were sweating, but I took the call anyway. Hello, this is Lian Chunhei from Xubai Trading.
The voice on the other end was cold.
We've already secured a supplier.
But they won't make it by tomorrow. The line went silent for half a second.
How do you know that? Because you're still looking for a backup supplier today.
Someone who isn't actually in a rush wouldn't be making a third call.
He didn't say a word. I knew I had hit the mark.
I pressed my advantage.
Right now, you don't need the lowest price.
What you need is guaranteed delivery. We can ship half of it tonight.
And the rest by tomorrow afternoon.
The price stays exactly the same.
The same? He finally asked.
Why aren't you raising the price?
Porching the receiver, I glanced at the specification sheets on my desk. Because I'm looking for a long-term partnership.
The line went silent for 3 seconds. Deal? By the time I hung up, my back was drenched in sweat, but I knew. Once this deal went through, I would finally have a secure foothold.
On commission day at the end of the month, the accountant handed me my envelope.
I tore it open and looked inside.
My fingers completely froze. $386. Back in Shangzhou. Even if I worked my butt off for 3 whole months.
I might not have even made that much.
枪月烧中的贴个路。
He almost screamed. Sister Lang,
you're rich.
I clutched those bills tightly in my fist.
It wasn't because the money was a shockingly huge amount,
but because for the very first time, I felt it with absolute certainty. Money earned by using your brain really burns so much hotter than a dead-end paycheck. That night, when I went back, I took the money and walked over to the post office. I stood there for a very long time.
In the end, I only sent 50 back. I didn't touch a single bill of what was left.
Because I suddenly realized, if you want to change your life, the first step isn't trying to save everyone else. It's making sure you can stand on your own 2 feet first.
I spent a month at Xubai Trading.
The more I looked, the more glaring the bottlenecks became.
I realized that the most stable demand wasn't for the casings
or the completed machines. It was those tiny parts that everyone looked down on. Screws and washers.
Small hardware accessories.
A single one is worth next to nothing. But if you're missing even one, the entire assembly line grinds to a halt. Big factories think the profit margins are too thin, and small factories can't produce them consistently. Most trading companies only use them to fill temporary gaps, and no one has ever truly dominated this market.
I stared at the shipping invoices from the past month, and the more I looked, the faster my heart raced.
At night, long after everyone had left, I was still sitting at the desk, running the numbers.
Shen Xubai walked out of the inner office.
Saw that I hadn't moved. Aren't you going home yet? Staying a bit longer? What are you looking at? I pushed a few sheets of paper in front of him. The models that are repeatedly out of stock. These 6 standard parts have been rushed the most over the past month. And these 4 assembly plants have almost all been desperately scrambling for temporary stock. And what does that prove? He leaned against the desk, watching me. You tell me, he said. I looked up. It means this isn't some random one-off shortage. It's a long-term shortage. If someone can lock down the supply for these specific models first, they'll corner the market. I started talking faster and faster. My mind rang sharper with every word. Once the rush orders start coming in, and clients get used to relying on us, we won't just be selling screws down the road. We can bundle in other small components, even casing and packaging. This isn't just a single order. It's a gateway. The office fell silent for a moment. The ceiling fan hummed softly overhead. Sensabai looked down, reading through the pages from start to finish. After a long pause, he finally spoke. Tomorrow, we go to Changfa Hardware. Why them? Because your notes say they can't afford delayed payments. They're desperately short on cash. I froze for a second, then smiled. Exactly. The next day, we paid a visit to Changfa Hardware. At first, Boss Du put on airs and acted aloof. But the moment he heard we wanted a long-term contract for 6 standard models and would pay cash on delivery, his eyes lit up instantly. He can light up all they want, but can you keep the supply stable? I chimed in. I won't make grand promises, but as long as your supply is stable, we'll source all these models from you first. But most importantly, you have to prioritize our urgent orders. Boss Du was still trying to feel us out on the price. Don't even think about driving up the price. We bring the volume, and you get fast cash flow. That's much better than chasing tiny one-off orders. He stared at me for a few seconds. Think, you talk like a seasoned merchant, little girl. I smiled. If poor people don't learn fast, we'll miss the train to getting rich. In the end, we locked in the deal. It wasn't a massive order, but I knew once I took this step, the path ahead would finally open up. Walking out of Changfa Hardware, the blazing sun made my head spin, but sitting in my car, my heart was burning with excitement. I knew I was finally done picking up scraps for others. I was finally setting up my own game. But just when things start looking up, the first to catch wind of it isn't always opportunity. Sometimes, it's a knife in the back. We get shots up the supply line with Changba Hardware. When the Yongsan assembly plant suddenly backed out, they were all over us the day before. Then the very next day, they canceled the order. Ah Cheng's face went completely pale. Sister Lam, something's not right. I flipped through their recent inquiry sheets, and my heart slowly sank. Every single model they inquired about was exactly the ones we had just secured. It was too perfect. Too perfect to be a coincidence. I looked up at Shinsabai. Someone is watching us. He didn't deny it. Who's your prime suspect? Kukonfa. Other than him, no one else would know which supply line we're targeting this fast, and no one wants to crush me and drag me down more than he does. That afternoon, Ah Chang and I went to Rongsan to test the waters. Ju, the purchasing manager, gave us a greasy fake smile. It's not that you guys aren't good. It's just that their prices are lower, and their deliveries faster. I asked, how much faster? He named a price. I scoffed the moment I heard it. There was barely any profit left at that price.
I was trying to make money.
He was trying to bleed us dry and choke us out. Did he promise you same-day delivery? Yes. And every single model fully stocked? I stared at him for 2 seconds and slowly grinned. Manager Zhu, do you honestly believe that? As he froze, I took a step closer and lowered my voice. Your next batch of orders is supposed to go through a strict quality inspection, isn't it? His face instantly pales. How did you know? Because you recently changed your packaging. The manuals and keys you're using are just cheap, local bulk stock. You wouldn't have gone to all this trouble otherwise. There's nothing wrong with wanting to save a quick buck right now. But the moment your specs get mixed up, or the metal isn't hard enough, you won't just be reworking a few boxes. It'll be your entire production line. He falls dead silent. I can tell he's already panicking inside. But people always love to gamble on a fluke, thinking they won't be the unlucky ones. I don't push him. I just slide my business card across the table. If you actually pull this off with no issues, then good for you. You save some money. But when things blow up, give me a call. Once we get outside, Ah Chung is practically losing his mind. Sister Liang, why didn't you play hardball and just force him into a deal? I shake my head. He isn't hurting yet. Only when he's bleeding out will he realize who can actually save his life. But I never expected that Hu Guangfa would strike even faster and more ruthlessly than I anticipated. First thing the next morning, Changfa Hardware calls us, saying the batch of goods we ordered is going to be delayed by 2 days. The second I hear that, it all clicks.
Ku Guofai is stealing our orders on one end
and choking off our supply on the other. He wants to completely rip apart this new supply chain we just built. Ah Chung is swearing up a storm in pure rage. Yeah, but I stay quiet. Because I know screaming won't solve a damn thing. I stare down at the specification chart on the table. Suddenly, I remember another supplier back in Shunqing. A small, low-profile supplier. Not to Only Hardware. Their output isn't massive.
but their delivery is lightning fast. Just as I'm about to say something,
Shasabai slides a slip of paper with an address written on it right in front of me.
Go here. My heart skips a beat. Holy. Exactly. Hu Guangfa is putting all his chips on Changfa. He'd never expect us to find his backup supplier.
At that exact moment, a fire blazes up in my chest. He wants to crush me into the dirt?
Then I'll tear out the ground right from under his feet.
Donghai Wadware was tucked away in a narrow alley in Nantu.
It wasn't a big place. It wasn't stayed about, but the roar of the machinery was deafening enough to make your ears buzz.
The owner was a man named Chen.
Lean, sharp, and shrewd. One look, and you could tell he was the type who only cared about efficiency and had zero patience for nonsense.
The moment I laid out my business proposal,
His very first words were, "I already supplied to Shunchong."
I know, I replied. He frowned. If you know that, how do you still have the nerve to come here?
because the volume they order from you is unstable, and their payments are slow.
But with us, we can pay you in cash up front.
Boss Chen's eyes flickered.
What do small hardware factories fear most? Dead stock and unpaid invoices. They're terrified that after making the goods, they won't get their money back.
I laid bare his absolute worst fears right then and there.
To start, we only need 3 models. The order volume isn't huge, but the turnover is fast. As long as you stay reliable,
Our orders will only grow from here. He stared at me for a long moment, then suddenly laughed. You don't beat around the bush, do you, girl?
in business, if you beat around the bush too much,
The money gets lost in the loops, too.
In the end, he nodded.
All right, let's start with one test order.
We had just closed the deal.
When the phone from Rongsin came ringing frantically, the purchasing agent's voice was literally cracking with panic. Miss Yang, do you have any stock left on your end?
I paused on purpose. What's wrong?
Chongqing mixed up the specifications in their batch.
Our assembly line is completely jammed.
I closed my eyes.
Sure enough, to squeeze the price, Hu Guangfa had taken a reckless gamble on the delivery deadline.
And it backfired spectacularly. How short are you?
We need 2 boxes of 19 first.
And another box of washers. The price goes back to normal, I said.
And I want cash up front today.
Fine. He agreed faster than anyone.
As the goods were being loaded,
Chang was so excited he couldn't stop slapping the crates.
Sister Leon, you called it.
But I knew this wasn't enough.
I didn't just want this single order.
I wanted to let Hu Guangfa know
That I'm not just some punching bag he can walk all over.
That night, we delivered the goods to Rongsin. The workshop was already in absolute chaos.
Whooped parts were piled across half the floor.
The boss's face was pale with panic.
The moment he saw me, it was like he was looking at his savior.
Miss Liang, can you help us resort the specifications right here on site?
Sure, but you'd better remember exactly who saved you today.
His face stiffened.
Then he nodded vigorously. I understand.
We worked our tails off sorting through the goods for over 2 hours. By the time we got back to the office,
Sure enough, someone from Shenzhen was waiting for us,
It wasn't Hu Guangfa himself.
but his accountant, who stormed in with a furious scowl on his face. Nakshana, what is the meaning of this? I sat at my desk, not even bothering to look up. Don't play dumb. Rongsin's order belonged to Xianqing. You intentionally stole it from us. Only then did I look up. Stole it?
their shipment had a major issue.
And they came to me, begging for help. How is it stealing when I simply took the job?
He choked on his words, then blurted out. Boss Hu said,
If you still want to survive in this industry, don't push things too far.
The moment those words left his mouth, the entire office fell dead silent.
I slowly stood up and glared at him. Go back and tell Hu Guangfa.
First, I win orders with skill, not theft. Second,
He's the one who failed to keep an eye on his own goods. It's not my fault. And third, I took a step forward. This is only the beginning. The accountant took half a step back under my intense gaze
and left in utter humiliation. The moment the door closed, Ah Chung slammed the desk hard.
That was so satisfying. I looked down at my hands, chafed red by the cardboard boxes, and a sudden wave of calm washed over me. For the first time. This was the first time I caught the blade head on, and then you shove it right back in their faces. Turns out, the sweet taste of a comeback isn't about winning an argument. It's that you're finally not afraid anymore. Once we saved that Rongsin order, our orders for standard parts suddenly skyrocketed. It wasn't overnight wealth, but the kind of steady, solid growth, built up piece by piece.
One client short of 2 boxes, another needing a restock of 3 models,
Someone else wanting to add on gaskets and packaging fasteners. The volume wasn't mind-blowing, but the payments came in fast.
The orders were frequent, and, most importantly, more and more people thought of us first whenever they were in a pinch. I knew this path was finally secure. At the end of the month, when payday came,
The accountant handed me my envelope with a big shildern and a great shoot.
not bad this month. I opened it up, and my breath caught in my throat. $12,270. For the first time in my life, I was gripping this much money tightly in my own hands. It wasn't a bride price given by someone else. It wasn't charity. It was money I earned, hustling for every single order.
Ah Chong rushed over to look
And screamed in excitement on the spot.
Sister Leo, you are an absolute genius.
I smiled, but as I kept smiling, my eyes started to well up. That evening, I went to look at apartments
And rented an 8-square-meter single room. The walls were old, the bed was old, and the window was tiny.
but that was my very own door. No more squeezing into a dorm room with 7 other people. No more hiding my cash inside shoe insoles. On the day I moved in,
Ling Xiaomin came over specifically to help me.
she held my old enamel mug,
And looked around the tiny room.
her eyes turning red with tears.
Young Chongte, you've really made it out.
I smiled as I made the bed.
And said, it's still early.
What do you mean early? She glared at me. Moving out of an 8-person dorm is a huge achievement in itself. I looked at him, and suddenly a thought crossed my mind. Do you want to come work with me? He froze. Work with you? Supply Trading has a lot of orders right now. I want to bring you over to help. If you're willing, I'll show you the ropes. His eyes welled up instantly. You really didn't forget about me. I looked away, pretending to adjust my pillow.
Stop being so sappy. But honestly, my own eyes were stinging a bit too.
After cleaning up that night, I sat on the edge of the bed, counting my cash. The rent was paid, and I still had some money left over. For the first time, I felt a real, solid sense of security about the future. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. I went to open it.
Standing outside was Shen Sabai.
Holding a small desk lamp in his hand, I was startled. What are you doing here? Just passing by, he said, handing the lamp to me. The light in your room is too dim. Checking the books in the dark will ruin your eyes. I cut it from him. My fingers accidentally brushed the back of his hand, making my heart skip a beat for some reason. Thank you. He glanced around the room. Are you getting used to it here? It's great. Way better than the dorms. He hummed in response, but he didn't seem in a rush to leave. So, I invited him in to sit for a bit.
The room was pitifully small. With someone as tall as him stepping inside, the entire space felt completely cramped.
Suddenly, I felt a little self-conscious, but he didn't seem uncomfortable at all. He just stared at the stack of order sheets on my desk. Still doing calculations? Yeah. What are you calculating? I want to save up some starting capital. Once I save enough. I want to run my own small workshop. He looked up at me. You want to start a factory? Not right now, but I have to plan ahead. I paused for a moment, and then added, I don't want to just be a middleman forever. If we don't control our own production, things will never be secure. He looked at me, silent for a long moment.
It was only after a while that he murmured, Yan Chunhe, you're moving even faster than I expected.
I felt a bit self-conscious, so I lowered my head and began adjusting the lamp.
Is it too rushed?
No, that's just how it is in Shenzhen. The timid only ever get the scraps. His voice was steady,
Soft, but carrying a warmth that made my heart race.
I looked up at him. The mob light fell across his face, carving out the sharp line of his brow and highlighting the depth in his eyes. In that single moment, it became incredibly clear to me. I didn't just trust him. I had begun to rely on him. The realization panicked me a little, but it also left me flushed. He seemed to sense it, his gaze lingering on my face for a second before naturally looking away. Get some rest. We still have to go to the Danmaku Theater tomorrow. All right? As he got up and walked to the door, I suddenly called out to him. Sensobai. Yes, thank you. Thank you for opening this door for me, and thank you for never treating me as just someone's accessory. He looked back at me, pausing for 2 seconds. Don't thank me just yet. There might be plenty of things you'll have to thank me for in the future. I froze for a moment. Ben broke into a smile. He smiled too. It was a faint smile, but for the first time, it wasn't guarded. Once the door closed, I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the lamp, lost in thought for a long time. Outside, the wind rattled the windows all night, and the tiny spark of emotion in my heart was like the shadow under the lamp, gradually taking shape. I returned to the village 2 months later. It's not because I miss home. It's because my mother is sick. It's nothing fatal, just a back injury from working too hard. I can't even get out of bed. Ling Xiaomin was helping me pack my things, cursing. Those people in your family really have some nerve coming to find you again. I split my money into 2 parts. One part went into my bag, and the other I kept hidden close to my chest. I'm not going back for them. I'm doing this for myself. I want to go back and see the place that forced me onto that train years ago. I want to see what their faces look like when they see me now. I boarded the long-distance bus heading back. By the time I reached the village entrance, it was already evening. Yanji village was exactly the same as always. Dirt roads, low walls, chickens scurrying, and dogs barking. Only this time, I no longer felt like I was going to be swallowed whole by this place. I wore the shirt and long skirt I bought in Shenzhen's, carrying my bag in my hand and clean leather shoes on my feet. They weren't expensive, but in this village, they were enough to turn heads.
The moment I stepped into the village, someone recognized me.
Oh my goodness, isn't that Chun-Hei? It really is. I heard she made a fortune in Guangdong.
Look at the way she's dressed.
She definitely doesn't look like that useless money loser anymore.
Their whispers drifted over, piece by piece.
I heard every single word clearly, but my heart was completely calm. When I finally got home, my mother was lying on the brick bed. The moment she saw me walk through the door,
Her eyes instantly turned red.
Chun-Hen. I placed the medicine and 2 bags of health supplements I bought on the table.
Does your back still hurt?
She froze, clearly not expecting that to be my very first question.
And her tears began to fall.
I thought you were never coming back. I didn't say anything to that.
I only went over to check the pain patch on his lower back.
He really was injured.
We wasn't faking it.
The walls around my hardened heart finally started to soften. But the very next second,
My brother, Liang Jinfu, swaggered in from outside. The moment he saw me,
his eyes immediately scanned the things on the table and my back.
Oh, you're actually back? His tone was exactly the same as always.
as if my only purpose in returning was to bring him money and make him look good.
I gave him a cold look. I came back to see
Mom.
Then you should also lend the family a helping hand while you're at it.
He rubbed his hands together with a greedy grin. My new house is still a bit short on cash for the bricks.
Link you in,
I said, calling him by his full name for the first time.
He froze.
I slammed a bag of medicine onto the table. My voice was dead calm. I came back today to buy medicine for Mom, not to bail you out of your endless financial holes.
Don't you dare bring up your house to me ever again.
His face darkened instantly. You really think you're hot stuff now that you've made a little name for yourself out there? Forgotten your own last name already?
Oh, I know. I looked at him and let out a slow, cold smile.
I know it all too well. And that is exactly why I won't let you leech off me in the name of the Lown family anymore. The moment those words left my mouth, the room fell dead silent.
My mother opened her mouth to speak,
but ultimately she couldn't find the words.
With a livid face, my brother slammed the door and stormed out in a rage.
Early the next morning, the news spread like wildfire throughout the entire village.
Word got out that I was back from Shenzhen, dressed like a wealthy city dweller,
and had actually dared to stand up to my brother.
Zhu Daxiang, of all people, practically sniffed his way over.
I was in the yard, drying the herbs, when he stood at the gate, staring at me.
His eyes were filled with an uncontrollable mix of regret and greed.
Chun-Hai.
I didn't even bother to look up.
Spit it out.
He stood there, clearing his throat awkwardly, and said, "About the past. I really did you wrong."
I tossed the clothes over the washing line
It turned to look him right in the eye.
He seemed to choke on my cold glare, but forced himself to keep going.
"I finally realized," he muttered.
"A woman like you is the only one who actually knows how to run a home.
My family agrees too.
As long as you're willing to come back, we can just forget about everything that happened before."
I almost burst out laughing.
"Zhu Daxiang, are you still dreaming?"
His face froze.
I slowly walked right up to him. "On the day you got engaged, didn't you say I'd never survive if I left this village?"
Well, look at me now. I survived.
So how do you have the nerve to crawl back to me now?
Do you still have any shame?
I stared him down, saying each word deliberately. "You're not coming back to me."
You're trying to climb way out of your league. A crowd of nosy neighbors had already gathered around the courtyard gate. As soon as those words left my mouth,
The crowd erupted into whispers and gasps.
Zhu Daxiang's face turned a deep, angry purple, and he couldn't squeeze out a single word for the longest time.
I turned around, walked inside, and slammed the door shut.
Muffled whispers drifted in from outside.
She really is different now. That girl must have made a fortune out there. The Shou family must have been blind to call off the engagement back then.
I stood behind the door, and my heart suddenly felt incredibly peaceful. I realized that the most satisfying revenge isn't screaming back in anger.
It's making them finally realize that the one they discarded back then wasn't just some poor village girl,
but someone they could never hope to reach for the rest of their lives.
I only stayed in the village for 2 days. Before leaving, I left my mother some money for medicine and a living allowance.
I didn't give my brother a single penny. When I was getting into the car, my mother chased me to the village entrance, holding my hand and crying.
Joan, Mother let you down.
I looked at her calloused hands
and felt a sudden pang of sadness in my heart.
Take care of yourself from now on, I said,
and stop constantly worrying about everyone else.
She nodded through her tears.
As the car pulled away,
I watched through the window as Langji village slowly faded into the distance. This time, there's no hatred left in my heart. No lingering attachment either. I'm just finally certain that I've truly moved on.
After coming back from Liang family village, it felt like I shed a whole layer of old skin. I became more grounded,
and my heart grew harder.
Xiao Sabai and I kept expanding our orders for standard parts. First, we swallowed up the long-term shortages of several assembly plants in Shenzhen.
Then, riding the wave of the home appliance boom, we branched out into packaging, casing accessories, and small hardware. 2 years later, with the first bit of capital I'd saved up, Xiao Sabai and I took over a small, failing hardware workshop. The building was run down, The machinery was ancient.
He had barely a dozen workers.
But standing there in that tiny grease-stinking workshop, my heart pounded so hard it felt like it would burst from my chest. I knew this wasn't just some rundown factory. It was the real, solid foundation I finally held in my own hands. That year, the winds of Shenzhen blew hotter than ever. Foreign trade was booming. All appliances were booming, and skyscrapers were shooting up across the city. Anyone with half a brain was scrambling to climb to the top.
And I, of course, was no exception.
I turned the workshop into a small factory for standard parts, starting with the 6 most stable models, and then gradually expanding our molds,
Production lines, and customer base, where others were strong.
I fought hard to secure my own stable share. People laughed, saying you can't make real money when a single screw only brings in a few cents. But I used those exact pennies, bit by bit, to feed and grow my factory. During that time, Hu Guangfu tried to set me up twice, once by slashing prices, and once by poaching my staff. But by then, I was no longer the naive Lang Chunhei who had just left Chuncheng. I had my own factory,
My own customers, and my own cash flow.
When he slashed my prices, I stood firm with my goods. When he poached my people, I simply gave my workers bonuses, improved their dorms, and raised meal allowances, the very details he despised the most. In the end, penny by penny, I fought hard and crushed him completely. 3 years later, Shuncheng's cash flow completely dried up. Couldn't hold on anymore and had to sell the factory. On the day he sold it, he came to see me in person. That was the last time I ever saw him. He sat in my office,
His face sagging and defeated. Garn was that arrogant bully who once thought he could crush me with a single word.
"Shanhe." He gave an awkward smile.
I was blind back then.
I sat behind my desk, slowly flipping through files, without even looking up.
Cut to the chase, boss. Who?
"Do you want to buy my old equipment?" Only then did I glance up at him. No. He was stunned. Why? Simply because I have no use for it anymore. The smile on his face instantly froze. At that moment, I suddenly remembered many years ago.
When he sat in his office at Chuncheng and sneered, "Without me, what are you?"
Finally, I could throw the answer right back in his face. Without him, I am my own person. After that, my factory grew bigger and bigger. We started with small hardware, gradually expanded to manufacturing complete sets, and eventually became one of the leading suppliers of standard home appliance parts.
I was no longer just Lang Shunhei.
I was President Young of Zhenghei Industries. And as for Shanatsubai, he went from a trade partner to a co-founder, and eventually to the most reliable anchor in my life.
He has always stood by my side. Neither of us was dependent on the other.
We simply crawled out of the mud together. By the time we reached the top, no one dared to look down on us ever again. He once told me something that I've remembered for years. So, your greatest strength isn't that you can endure hardships. It's that every time you're backed into a corner, you always find a way out.
At the time, I laughed and teased him for being such a smooth talker.
But deep down, I knew there really aren't many people in this world who truly understand you. Later on, when the company was preparing to go public and the news started to spread, the entire Liang village went into an absolute frenzy. Zhu Dosang actually sent someone to beg for a meeting with me. I refused. Then the Liang father and son showed up with gifts, babbling about how family ties can never be broken. I just had the receptionist return their gifts completely untouched. It's not that I still hold a grudge. It's just that I finally don't have to prove to anyone that I deserve to be seen. On the day of our IPO, I stood under the bright lights of the stock exchange in a dark, tailored suit. A massive crowd sat below the stage. There were clients, competitors, journalists, and even a few people from my past who once stepped all over me. I spotted them instantly. But I felt absolutely nothing, because they had stopped mattering a long time ago. When they handed me the hammer to ring the opening bell, I suddenly remembered a night from many years ago, when I was wearing an ill-fitting red jacket, being publicly humiliated at my own engagement banquet. And then, grabbing my cheap woven sack, boarding that slow, green-skinned train south to Shenzhen, all by myself. Back then, I only had 87 yuan in my pocket. Everyone thought I wouldn't survive. Everyone saw me as nothing but a worthless, money-losing burden. Yet, here I am, standing right here. The lights below the stage are blindingly bright. Countless eyes are looking up at me. Holding the hammer in my hand, my grip is rock steady. It felt like I could hear Zhao words ringing in my ears again. He said that if I left the village, I wouldn't even be able to stay alive. A smile suddenly crossed my face, and I struck the bell with everything I had. As the chime echoed through the hall, only one thought filled my mind. The whole village laughed at me for heading south to turn screws on an assembly line. But in the end, I rose so high they could never hope to reach me.